Chapter 99. The east coast was a few kilometers long, with a total of 171 fragrant coconut trees of various sizes. The small fragrant coconut trees might only be a few meters tall, and some even had just sprouted seedlings. The largest fragrant coconut tree, the one where the winged peregrine falcon and the fruit-stealing monkeys fought, was nearly 60 meters tall and slanted towards the sea. List rode Fiery Dragon and hid in the shade of the tallest fragrant coconut tree. He guessed that if a sprite worm was really born, then it must be this tree king. The worm stalk was far larger, stronger, and more spirited than ordinary plants. If it were before, he would have had to search tree by tree to determine if it was a worm stalk. But now it was different. He directly released magic eyes and looked at the top of the 60-meter-tall fragrant coconut tree. There was a slight change in his field of vision. Faint light blue magic power was circulating in the canopy at the top. It was not very clear, but it was enough. There are traces of magic power. Sure enough, this fragrant coconut tree has already become a worm stalk. My 8th sprite worm is about to arrive. However, this sprite worm climbed a bit high. List thought about it and decided not to investigate it himself. Climbing a tree was really unbecoming of a lord. He turned to look at the fruit farmer on the side. "Your name is Giggs, are you the manager of the fruit-stealing monkeys training ground?" Giggs nodded hurriedly. "Yes, Sir Lord." "Can you climb trees?" "Yes." "Then climb the tree, and be careful not to damage the bark. Go up and see if there is anything unusual about the fragrant coconut." "Yes, Sir Lord." Giggs immediately used his hands and feet to climb the canopy. Although not as fast as the fruit-stealing monkeys, he was still steady and arrived at the canopy little by little. A moment later, Giggs climbed down and began to report, "My lord, it's very strange. There's a fragrant coconut that looks ripe and very sweet. It's also very, very big. Oh, it's as big as a wash basin." A normal fragrant coconut was about the size of a big bowl. Now that there was a wash basin-sized fragrant coconut, there was no doubt that there was a sprite worm hidden inside. List smiled. "Giggs, remember, this tree is a worm stalk, and the fragrant coconut is giving birth to my sprite worm. You have to look after this tree for me. You are not allowed to touch the fragrant coconut, and you have to go up and observe it once a day. If the fragrant coconut cracks, inform the castle immediately, understand?" Heavens, is that a sprite worm? Unbelievable. Giggs was overjoyed and hurriedly replied, "Sir Lord, please rest assured, Giggs will definitely guard the sprite worm." He nodded lightly. List concentrated and summoned the smoke mission. He felt a little smug. He had just completed a smoke mission half an hour ago, and now he had completed another one. This efficiency was too high. As expected. Smoke serpentines, mission completed. Reward, fragrant coconut sprite worm. In a flash, a new mission appeared. The new milky bread brought by the caravan made Rainer of the bakery have a flash of inspiration. He wants to make a new kind of bread, and perhaps adding some meat would be a good idea, but he is very distressed that he can only sell black bread. Please help him realize the development of a new kind of bread. Reward, shipwreck treasure. Shipwreck treasure? List's eyes shone. When he saw the word treasure, he couldn't help but feel excited. What could be more exciting than finding a treasure and obtaining an unexpected windfall? The mission must be completed. Rainer wants to make a new kind of bread, adding some meat? Is he going to invent meat floss bread? The cooking industry in this world was still stuck in a very primitive state of food processing: barbecued meat, grilled fish, boiled eggs, boiled meat, fried steak, cold salad. Sauce was invented, and people liked to put some sauce on everything they ate. Milk was limited to making cheese and pudding, and people liked to stuff minced meat into it. The most frightening thing was that people liked to add intact ingredients to the paste and roast them. They called it pie. Mrs. Abbey used to be very good at a kind of food called shiitake pie. The specific method was to mix flour, sugar, and oil into a paste, then sprinkle the whole shiitake mushroom into the paste and put it into the oven to roast. Thus, a shiitake pie was ready. List really couldn't get used to eating this pie. He always felt that it was an insult to his taste buds. Even his IQ. But many times, he had to endure the devastation of this dark cuisine. He deeply regretted not going to the New Oriental to learn how to cook. 800 stainless steel beds, 200 people, bread was the staple food of another world. From the king to the serfs, everyone ate bread. It was just that the aristocrats ate white bread, while the poor ate black bread. The aristocrats certainly had their own requirements for food. Unfortunately, the talent of the chefs was limited. After so many years, white bread was still white bread, and black bread was still black bread. How do you make meat floss bread? List recalled the meat floss bread he had eaten. It seems that you sprinkle some meat floss on top of the bread? But how do you make meat floss? He couldn't figure it out. He quickly put away his thoughts, gave a few instructions to the fruit farmers, mounted his horse, and left the oyster settlement. The retainer knight had already gone to inform Gort. List didn't need to worry about the protection of the fragrant coconut tree's cordyceps. He was ready to set off for the town's bakery to inspect the lives of the commoners. The bakery was located in the most conspicuous location in the town. It was a rare two-story wooden building. Bread was sold on the first floor, while the baker's family lived on the second floor. The bakery mainly offered two kinds of services. One was to sell all kinds of black bread, and the other was to bake bread. Not all serfs could afford to buy black bread. Most of them used the bakery's oven to bake the black bread with their own bran and other materials. Raynal was a freedman, as well as the town's wealthiest freedman. Reportedly, his family property was worth as much as 5 gold coins. He was fully deserving of being the flour town's richest man. However, there were also people who said that the old drunkard was the richest man. He had sold his blacksmith shop to the lord for 3 gold coins. Despite his good wine, but his blacksmithing skills still brought the old drunkard a lot of wealth. At this time, Raynal was guarding the oven, waiting for a new batch of bread to come out of the oven. However, he was a bit distracted. He was one of the few people in the town who could regularly taste white bread. A few days ago, the caravan had brought milk bread. He had bought a bit and tasted a different and wonderful taste. It also made him understand that bread could be made to taste better. Can I make better bread? In the past, he wouldn't have even thought about it. Because even if he could make it, no one in the town could afford it. But now it was different. The road to the Thorns Ridge had been opened. The castle's caravan would go out to trade practically every 3 days. He could go with the caravan and sell his bread outside. It would be fine as long as he could go to the North Valley city, where many aristocrats lived. Moreover, I can also sell it to Sir Lord. Raynal recalled the day the caravan arrived. When he met Mrs. Abbey, he chatted with her and learned that she could only make the simplest white bread. Sir Lord should be tired of the monotonous white bread. Most of the caravan's milk bread has been bought by the castle. At this moment. Chapter 100. Inside the bakery, List saw the fair and plump Raynor. He didn't show much concern for his subjects, nor did he show a kind and amiable demeanor. He went straight to the point. Raynor, how long have you been making bread? I started making bread when I arrived at the flower farm, Sir Lord. I have been making bread for 18 years. Said Raynor respectfully, my mother used to be a kitchen maid in Tulip Castle. She taught me how to make bread. When Sir Count opened the flower farm in Flower Town, I followed him. The history of Coral Island's development could no longer be verified. It was said that before the Grand Duke came overseas to establish a nation, Coral Island was already inhabited by humans. Later, Sapphire Grand Duke declared Coral Island to be owned by the kingdom and sent officials to govern it. It was already 20 years ago when Lee William Tulip was conferred the title of Earl of Coral Island due to his military exploits. At that time, Levis was just 2 years old and Elvira and Liszt had not yet been born. In those years, the Count bought serfs wantonly to enrich Coral Island and reclaim the wasteland. 18 years ago, a new tulip was discovered in Flower Town, for which the Count reclaimed the flower farm. At its peak, Tulip reached 200 mu, and the small castle was built at that time. The following year, 17 years ago, as more and more serfs gathered on the flower farm, Flower Town was built. Rainer went from being a baker who made bread for the flower farm to being a baker in a small town and settled down there. Life in the small town was hard, but Rainer quite enjoyed it. In a flash, 18 years passed. He had become the richest commoner in Flower Town. Liszt then asked, "Have you been making black bread?" "I occasionally make some white bread, especially on New Year's Day. Also, when commoners get married, they will order a little white bread from me." "How is your white bread craftsmanship?" I don't know, Sir Lord. But Mrs. Abbey of the castle has tasted my white bread, and she says it tastes very good." Next to him, Rainer's wife suddenly interjected, "Sir Lord, Mrs. Abbey also said that she wants to study milk bread with Rainer. She said that Sir Lord likes it very much." "Sir Lord didn't ask you anything. Who allowed you to speak?" Rainer glared at his wife before hurriedly apologizing, "I'm sorry, Sir Lord. Rebecca is a foolish woman. She has offended your dignity, Sir Lord." Liszt didn't mind. He was not a prickly nobleman who could not take the slightest offense. Besides, he did not feel that Rebecca's interjection was an offense. On the contrary, he was very happy that Abbey was cooperating with Rainier to make milk bread. He was supportive of food research, so he said with a smile, "Rainer, the castle needs bread with a better texture. Since you have communicated with Mrs. Abbey, then very well, create more bread with different tastes. Don't be afraid of not being able to sell it. As long as it tastes good, the castle will purchase it in large quantities." Rainer was overjoyed. This was exactly what he wanted. He accepted the order on the spot and said, "Sir Lord, please rest assured, Rainer and Mrs. Abbey will definitely study milk bread and more new types of bread with a wonderful taste. I look forward to it." Liszt got up and added, "I like to add a little meat to bread, but the roasted meat is too dry and hard to match with bread. Perhaps, you can try to make the meat very soft, like mixing it with bread. Perhaps it will taste good. Rainer will remember." It was estimated that Rainer and Abbey would have to study for at least 10 days to half a month before they could make meat floss bread or some other new type of bread. At least, before Liszt attended Levis's birthday party, he would not be able to complete this task. Soon, it would be August 16th. There were only 3 days left before Levis's birthday. After his birthday, Levis would be 23 years old. At his age, the Count and Melissa had already given birth to him. However, Levis had not found a suitable marriage partner and remained single. Lord Knightladen sent Levis's birthday invitation from Tulip Castle. After receiving the invitation, the butler Carter began to get busy preparing the gift. "Master, are we really only going to use seafood as a birthday gift?" he asked with some uncertainty. Liszt had told him to just send some seafood as a gift. However, seafood was the cheapest food in the Flower Town, even cheaper than rye bread. It was everywhere on the East Coast. Not only fishermen, but even serfs would pick up some shells to eat. Liszt read the book without raising his head. "Mr. Carter, apart from seafood, what other specialties of the Flower Town are worth bringing out?" This rhetorical question left Carter speechless. The remote town really did not have any praiseworthy specialties. He still tried his best to think, "Master, perhaps we can send some of the Thorns Ridge's wild fruits." No. I have been poisoned by eating wild fruits. Although I have already distinguished the types of wild fruits, but there are still risks. Apologies, Master, I was rash. This is nothing. After all, the castle picks a lot of wild fruits every day. We are already used to it. I just feel that sending wild fruits is not a good sign. It was because of wild fruits that Liszt had occupied his predecessor's body and memories. Of course, he would not disregard wild fruits. He had ordered people to pick and experiment on all the wild fruits in the Thorn's Ridge. In the end, he found 2 types of poisonous fruits. One of them was the black date fruit that had poisoned his predecessor. The black date fruit was the size of a fist and was slightly purplish-black in color. The other wild fruits were edible. However, there was no guarantee that there were no poisonous wild fruits in the depths of the Thorn's Ridge. The wild fruits were picked by the bold serfs from the fruit trees at the edge of the Thorn's Ridge. There were also some fruit trees in the small town, but not many, and only a few fruits could be born. Liszt had already ordered people to collect the seeds of all kinds of wild fruits, preparing to plant them in batches at the beginning of next spring. Unfortunately, there was no guarantee that they would germinate. Without sprite worms, the growth of wild fruit trees was bound to be a difficult process. It was not that the serfs had not thought of planting them, but that they could not survive. For the time being, the castle's wild fruits could only be picked from the Thorn's Ridge. Rejected as a birthday gift, Carter did not know what gift he should send that was more suitable than seafood. Unexpectedly, Liszt remembered that ordinary wild fruits from the Thorn's Ridge were not suitable to send, but there were still many fragrant coconuts on the east coast. Calculating the time, a batch of fragrant coconuts should have matured. Mr. Carter, contact the fruit farmers and have them pick a bag of fragrant coconuts. Match the fragrant coconuts with seafood as a gift. Yes, master. August 19th. Early in the morning, Liszt put on his leather armor and the red-blood sword. When the sun had just risen, he set off with his retainer knight, welcoming the warm wind. Chapter 101. Walking on the main road of the Thorn's Ridge. Liszt was still very satisfied. When he first came here, this road made him panic, and he was constantly worried that World of Warcraft would suddenly appear. Now that he had a wide field of vision, he wasn't the slightest bit worried about World of Warcraft's invasion. The original dirt road had also taken on a brand new look, turning into a gravel road, although it was still bumpy. Marcus was riding the already pregnant yellow-gray horse, half a body's length behind Liszt's black dragon. He was fully armed and fearless of the weather, which had already begun to heat up. He was not only a tutor who taught Liszt night lessons, but also a knight who was ordered by the count to protect Liszt. In some countries, such a knight was called chief knight, but the Grand Duchy did not implement this system. Behind Liszt and Marcus was Karl Hammerstein, the town's defense officer. He didn't need to come, but he still volunteered to protect Liszt. Perhaps he just wanted to take this opportunity to go to Coral City to see the scenery, as well as to show his loyalty. Next to Karl were Philip Wohl and Xavier Oxtung. These 2 young retainer knight were quite talented and were the first in the squad to cultivate qi. Behind them was Rome Winesong, who had also successfully cultivated qi the day before yesterday. As one of the first 4 retainers to serve as Liszt's retainers, Rome worked hard and finally made progress. Liszt immediately appointed him as the patrol captain to assist Karl in managing the patrol. Unfortunately, the other 2 of the 4 retainers, Grey Sickle and Auden Shu Shop, still hadn't cultivated their qi. Marcus had given up on teaching them. Their talent was too poor, and they had missed their teenage years, so there was no hope. Liszt had them serve as official assistants, one to assist the legal officer, Blair, and the other to assist the financial officer, Isaiah. To his own people, Liszt was still sentimental and gave them a good status. At the end of the team were 4 young knights. They were second only to Philip and Xavier in the knight squad. They were also transferred to Liszt's side as retainer knight. As for the other members of the knight squad, they were still diligently training in the small town. There was also his valet, Thomas. The entire team consisted of 11 people and 11 horses. The hooves of the horses galloped, stirring up waves of sand and dust. As there were many pregnant mares in the team, they did not move too fast. However, they still arrived at the tulip castle surrounded by a sea of tulip flowers at around 10:30 a.m. "Oh, my dear brother, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Levis was wearing a festive costume with a noble smile on his face. He opened his arms wide and welcomed Liszt. It was a very warm welcoming etiquette. Liszt dismounted from the horse and also opened his arms wide to hug Levis. "Dear brother, happy birthday. Thank you for your blessing." Liszt waved to Thomas and the retainer knight behind him. "Bring the gifts I prepared." The gifts were presented and handed to Silva, the deputy steward behind Levis. "What is it?" "It's a very big bag. It seems you spent a lot." Levis let the valet open it. According to the custom here, gifts had to be opened in person. The gifts in the bag were beautifully wrapped. First, there were coconuts the size of large bowls, wrapped in strips of cloth. They looked very classy, and the faint fragrance of coconut milk hit their nostrils. "This is the fragrant coconut. The coconut milk inside is very fragrant and sweet. Open it and have a sip. Then, you will know how sweet and delicious it is," Liszt said exaggeratedly. In fact, it was only slightly better than the ordinary coconut milk on earth. However, the fruit that could be drunk directly was unique. Sure enough, Levis became curious. "Coconut milk? Is this fruit filled with milk?" "Yes. It's amazing. I can't wait to taste it." Levis turned to look at the other side of the bag. It was all wrapped in small bags. "What are these?" "It's seafood." "Seafood? Brother, don't think that they are ordinary. These seafood are the most precious seafood that fishermen catch. Especially the older oysters." Saying this, Liszt moved closer to Levis's ear. "It can let you not sleep at night and let you do what you want to do." Levis's eyes lit up. "Really? This is too precious." "Thank you, Liszt, my dear brother. This is the best birthday gift I received." He was not married yet, but who said that unmarried nobles could not have a bunch of mistresses? After receiving the gifts, the two brothers walked into the castle side by side. The hall of the castle was already crowded with nobles, big and small. Apart from the two viscounts who sent their sons, the other baron and lord, knight were present in person. After all, Levis was the heir of Coral Island, the future Earl of Coral Island, and the next lord they would follow. "It's very lively." Liszt had to put on a standard aristocratic smile and greet the aristocrats who came to the birthday party. He did not like this kind of masked communication. However, as a member of the aristocracy, such occasions were indispensable if he wanted to maintain the dignity of an aristocrat. After a round of greetings, he was going to pay a visit to the Count. But after asking Levis, he learned that the Count had already left Coral Island. The Grand Duke's messenger brought an order. "All the direct feudal lords will go to Blue Dragon Island to discuss this year's development order. In fact, I am already training orders of chivalry, ready to follow my father to the continent at any time." The development order was the most popular order of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. The order was very simple. It was to respond to the call of the King of Iron and Steel Ridge to go to the continent and plunder wealth, especially mines. Gold, silver, copper, iron, aluminum, and all kinds of gems were the targets of contention. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom and the Eagle Kingdom were enemies, and both countries had slaughtered each other's dragons. Therefore, a large-scale war broke out almost every year to plunder each other's mines. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was a vassal state of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. It was not strong, but it was very threatening to harass by sea. In the past, the Count had penetrated deep into the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom, seized an iron mine in one fell swoop, and plundered at least 200,000 tons of iron ore. It was said that at that time, the ships pulling iron ore were densely packed, like ants moving house. Such a heavy loss, the king of the Eagle Kingdom was furious and sent a dragon knight to intercept the fleet, but was blocked by the Dragon Knight of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. It was also in that battle that Marquis Merlin Longtaro, the captain of the palace fleet, saw the potential of Lee William and married his daughter Melissa to him. Liszt had heard this story since he was a child. Every time at a banquet, the nobles would recall the past, and they would always mention this story to flatter the count. Unfortunately, since that battle, the Eagle Kingdom had paid more attention to the protection of the coastline, and there was no chance to achieve such a brilliant record. Every year, a batch of knights' blood was sacrificed, but only a small amount of metal and gem mines could be exchanged. "Brother, are you also going to the battlefield?" Liszt was a little surprised. "Yes, I am already 23 years old. Although I am not married yet, I am old enough. If I don't go to the battlefield, it will be a stain on my record." Liszt shook his head and pretended to be regretful. "I don't have a qualified knight team, and I don't even have the opportunity to go to the battlefield. I really want to fight side by side with my brother and win the glory of the knight." In fact, he did not want to go to the battlefield. Chapter 103. Liszt, do you see that? I planted 10 acres of black tulip. Sweet Fragrance, the great elf, flew in the sea of tulip flowers. Behind her was a patch of tulip that had not yet bloomed. The rows of tulip, under the glaring sun, were a little scratchy. At noon, not only would people be listless, but so would plants. Only the elves were still so carefree and energetic. Wow! Wow! The two little elves followed behind Sweet Fragrance, their mouths shouting some meaningless sounds. Elves were not social creatures, but elves of the same species could play together and share the different species of plants they had mastered with each other. These two tulip elves were Sweet Fragrance's attendants. Tulip Castle had always hoped that these two little elves could break through the shackles and evolve into new great elves. Planted at the end of June, they've already budded in less than 2 months. Liszt strolled between the fields, looking at the budding black tulip with excitement. In about a month, these tulip would turn into gold coins and flow into his pocket. Sweet Fragrance raised her beautiful head and said proudly, "Of course, these are the tulip I planted, and every seed has germinated under my care." That expression was clearly saying, "Come and praise me." Liszt smiled and praised, "Sweet Fragrance is amazing. Hee, I am amazing." Sweet Fragrance did 2 somersaults in the air. Wow! Wow! The two little elves imitated Sweet Fragrance's movements and also somersaulted in the air. Liszt, these black tulip are growing very well, their magic content is also abundant, and there are no obvious attributes. Compared to the 2 potions Tulip Castle has mastered, they are better, and mages have already come to place orders. Levis' tutor, Frank, accompanied Liszt. It will become the new pillar of Tulip Castle and make the family stronger. Brother will rely on it to continue father's footsteps and become a Sky Knight. I wholeheartedly agree with your words. Levis is extremely talented. There is no doubt that he will become a Sky Knight. At this time, Xiangxiang Bela had already been playing around for a while. She flew in front of Liszt and said with a smile, "I will help Levis break through. When the time comes, I will take him flying, just like how I took you guys flying when you were young." When Liszt and the others were young, Xiangxiang Bela loved to grab them and fly into the sky. She watched as the little children screamed in fear. However, once they got used to the high altitude and stopped crying, Xiangxiang Bela was no longer interested in bringing them along. An elf with a wicked sense of humor. Liszt thought of these scenes and felt very warm. Xiangxiang loved to play around, but it had no intention of harming them. Because of the contract, it was very close to the Tulip family's bloodline. It will be memorable. It will be best if you can scare Levis to tears again. Xiangxiang Bela said regretfully, I can't scare Levis to tears now. When he becomes a Sky Knight, it will be even more difficult to scare him to tears. At that time, he will already be able to conquer the sky. The reason why a Sky Knight was called a Sky Knight was because they had already mastered high-level battle energy. When battle energy was released, they could fly in the air for a short period of time. Although they could not fly freely like birds, the short leap was enough to ensure that they could quickly attack anyone or anything within a few hundred meters of them. After visiting the Black Tulip field, Levis had already sent most of the nobles away. Those who stayed were on good terms with him. Liszt was also preparing to leave. He did not intend to spend the night in Tulip Castle, so he directly called Levis to the study to discuss some matters. "Liszt, can't we talk about it at night? There are still many people in the living room that I need to entertain." "Brother, I don't intend to stay here for the night. After discussing things with you, I will go back." "So urgent? There are many things in town waiting for me to deal with." "All right, what do you want to talk to me about?" "Teacher Frank has already brought you to see the Black Tulip plantation. The slave trading fleet will have to wait at least more than a month before they can return." "I'm not talking about this. I have something else to talk to you about." Liszt wanted to talk about seafood, but it did not feel very impactful to say it directly. He had to first lay the groundwork and whet Levis's appetite before discussing seafood as a shareholder. After thinking for a while, he said, "I have mastered a new magic potion." "What?" Levis was shocked. "You have a new tulip magic potion?" "Not tulip, it's a mushroom, a flame mushroom, a magic potion mushroom." Liszt was very satisfied with Levis's expression. "Do you need a cooperation, my dear brother?" "Cooperation? We are blood brothers, the best cooperation partners, isn't it?" "Of course." "Then how do you intend to cooperate? Are you still following the Black Tulip model? Are you going to cooperate with me personally? I don't like to give benefits to Madame Marie and Lytton. Therefore, I will still cooperate with you, brother. However, this time, I am only going to sell the finished flame mushrooms to you. You will be the seller of the flame mushrooms and will not be involved in the cultivation of the flame mushrooms." Liszt stated the cooperation plan that he had thought of. He wanted to make the flame mushrooms a specialty of the flower town and did not intend to directly sell the cultivation technique. This is not appropriate. How many flame mushrooms can be grown in the flower town? Sell me the cultivation technique, I will produce them, and a share of the sales would be great. I am in urgent need of gold coins to buy serfs. Otherwise, a share of the sales would also be acceptable. If you can directly give me 5,000 gold coins, then I can even directly sell you the cultivation technique of the flame mushrooms without any subsequent share. You only need to help me sell the flame mushrooms I produce in the future. 5,000 gold coins? Levis sighed, I can't even take out 1,000 gold coins. Forget it, let's directly sell the finished product. Without haggling too much, the cooperation was thus reached. Soon after, Liszt said, "Brother, have you found a saltpeter mine?" "No, I have searched all the cities, yet no one has found similar ores." "You really are a lucky guy. Why do you always run into good things? Maybe good things come to good people. Hee hee. By the way, brother, I still have a business that I want to cooperate with you." Levis's eyes shone. What business? His younger brother, who had suddenly become mature, had already brought him too many surprises. Just the black tulip and the flame mushrooms alone were equivalent to increasing his chances of promoting to a Sky Knight by 20%. This made him full of confidence in being a medicine pot. Seafood business. I have already prepared to station caravans in all the cities of the Coral Island to sell seafood. However, seafood fishing is not a technical job. There will always be people who will jump out and compete with me for the hard-earned money. Therefore, I intend to give you 20% of the shares in exchange for you to help me get a permit to sell seafood on the Coral Island. He wanted to monopolize the seafood business and legalize it, directly cutting off the possibility of other people's business. The seafood market is not small. I heard that you can now earn several gold coins a day. Levis said carelessly. I don't know where brother heard that, but I can't even earn a single gold coin a day. Maybe later, when I start selling it in all the cities, I can earn 2 gold coins a day? List first complained about being poor, then threatened, if you don't help me, I will ask father to help me get one. I just want to earn a bit of hard-earned money to buy white bread to eat, that's all, brother. Perhaps the Count really did not like List. However, if List really begged, the Count should not refuse. After all, this business was opened up by List. Alright, but I want 30% of the shares. The decree will be issued tomorrow. When father left, he asked me to temporarily take over the management of the Coral Island. Levis took a puff from his cigar and said with a beaming smile. Greed. List inwardly despised him, but on the surface, he said, all right, 30% it is. Chapter 104. What is this? Levis picked up the black pearl and weighed it in his hand. Does it have magic power? It feels like it has water attribute magic power. It does indeed have magic power, it is a pearl. Pearl? Levis shook his head, don't think that I have never seen pearls. The pearl ornaments that I have given out are not few in number. I once took a boat tour on the Blue Dragon Island's tranquil lake and even dug out pearls from pearl oysters. They were white and not this big. This is a black pearl, dug out from another kind of giant clam. Giant clam? Is it produced in the Flower Town? Levis caught the point, the Flower Town's production was too rich. In fact, the waves brought the corpse of a huge squid. There was a giant clam inside the corpse, and a black pearl was dug out from the giant clam. Brother, regardless of whether it is a pearl or not, what do you think of its value? Water attribute magic power treasures are more precious than white pearls. Are you going to give it to me? Don't be so greedy, I have already given you a birthday present. This black pearl is a treasure that I carry with me. It can help me calm my restless emotions, the effect is dozens of times better than that of white pearls. I would like to ask you if you are interested in buying it. After all, I have fire attribute chi, while you have water attribute chi. That is true. Compared to white pearls, the black pearl gives me a more comfortable feeling. How many gold coins are you going to sell it for? On the market, white pearls of the same size are worth about a few gold coins. I will buy it for 10 gold coins, how about it? 10 is too little. It is not little, List. No matter how much it calms down, it is just an ornament. Perhaps wizards can forge it into magic equipment. It has excellent magic power storage, suitable for forging magic equipment. There are no wizards in my Flower Town, but I believe that you, brother, must have some connection with wizards. Why not ask a wizard to help you forge a magic equipment? Levis shook his head, if it had more magic power, then it could indeed be forged into magic equipment. However, it does not have enough magic power, so it would be difficult to forge a useful magic equipment. Cough, cough, in fact, List then revealed his true purpose. He drew a circle with his hand, which was the size of a big bowl. I also have a black pearl of this size. It contains rich magic power and is absolutely suitable for making magic equipment. Water attribute magic power is naturally suitable for you, brother. A bigger black pearl? So big? Levis was no longer calm. Although fist-sized black pearls were rare, they were at most an interesting accessory. Bowl-sized black pearls, on the other hand, were different. If he really had such a large black pearl, coupled with the dense mana, it would definitely be a good material for mana equipment. Those mages would spend a lot of money to buy it for research just because of its rarity. 500 gold coins, I'll sell you the black pearl. I want to take a look at the black pearl. First. List called his valet, Thomas, and asked him to fetch the bowl-sized black pearls from Marcus. A moment later, a slightly irregularly shaped, gigantic black pearl appeared on the table in the study. Rubbing the huge black pearl, Levis's eyes kept glowing. Compared with the inexperienced Liszt, he knew the value of this treasure better, so he gave his offer: "I'll buy it for 100 gold coins. This is a novelty. Although it is rich in magic power, there is no guarantee that it really has development value. I can't risk buying something that can't be used." What he said made sense. Liszt wasn't sure if the Black Pearl could really forge magic equipment. But bargaining was still necessary. After several back and forth, the Black Pearl was finally sold for 280 gold coins. In addition, the fist-sized Black Pearl in his hand was also included in the transaction as an accessory. After the transaction, Liszt smiled and said, "Brother, let me know when you're done with the magic equipment. I want to see what it's used for. This is also the first time I've come in contact with black pearls." After determining the use of the black pearls, the real value of the remaining ones could be calculated. No problem. Just as he was about to leave the study, Liszt suddenly remembered something and asked, "By the way, brother, has Tulip Castle bought any new books recently?" "No, since when did you like reading so much?" "I'd rather drink until dawn than stay in the study and read those dazzling words. There is a lot of interesting knowledge hidden in the books." "Knowledge?" Levis laughed. "Liszt, do you want to change careers and become a mage? That's not a good idea. I often deal with those mages. They are all eccentric lunatics who talk about knowledge and exploration. The glory of a knight is always won on horseback." Liszt walked quickly out of the study. There was a house of gold and books, and there was a beauty in books. As a cultured man, he didn't want to lower himself to the same level as the other party. The cooperation had been confirmed. Liszt said goodbye to Levis and left Tulip Castle. However, he did not go back directly. Instead, he walked along the path to an independent castle next to Coral City. It was Madame Penelope's residence. Since he had come to Coral City, he had to see his grandmother. The castle was covered with creepers. It added a lot of ancient aura to the castle, as well as a bit of inexplicable gloom. There was a platform on the second floor of the castle, which was covered with flowers and plants. Madame Penelope's life, apart from aristocratic socializing, was mostly spent on these flowers and plants. While watering the flowers, she chatted, "You came out of the castle so soon. Didn't Levis ask you to stay for dinner to continue the celebration?" "I refused. There are still many things in Flower Town that I cannot do without. A qualified lord always keeps himself busy. As long as people are busy, they will feel fulfilled and effectively prevent their life from degenerating. Your father has been busy all day at your grandfather's side since he was a child. That is why he could become a count before the age of 30. Madame Penelope turned around and continued watering the flowers. "Unfortunately, ever since he married 2 troublesome daughters-in-law, he hasn't been able to go any further. I really hope that your brother can sober up a bit, but that little guy is also a fool. The youngest daughter of Marquis Roderick is a troublesome person." Marquis Roderick, one of the Grand Duchy's 7 marquises, served in the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry, and was the vice-commander. No wonder Levis was still unmarried. It turned out that he had taken a fancy to the Marquis' daughter. Cousin Meopel is deeply in love with the little princess, while elder brother is in love with Marquis Roderick's daughter. It seems that both of them have their own ideas. The same goes for you. Me? Don't think that just because I am old, I won't be able to hear news about you, Athena Salmon, right? I heard from Elvira that it is a very lovely little girl who admires you endlessly, yet you actually refused her. She is the daughter of a viscount. Although fish sellers are rather vulgar, but with gold coins, you can still eat white bread, right? Hee hee. Liszt didn't want to say anything more. Madame Penelope continued to ramble on about, young people are insensible, and the like. But soon, she turned her attention to her pot of flowers. Chapter 105. Black nightshade was said to be a close relative of eggplant, a plant that bore small black berries, the fruit of which was very tasty. When he was young, there were a lot of wild black nightshades growing in the fields, which Liszt liked to eat very much. He didn't know if the black nightshade in Madame Penelope's flowerpot was a species he was familiar with. But when he heard that the plant was sick, he immediately stepped forward out of habit, unleashed magic eyes, and took a look at the dying black nightshade. When he glanced at it, he seemed to see a faint flow of magic power, but it was just a flash before quickly disappearing. He was pleasantly surprised. Magic power meant that this black nightshade was unusual. It isn't going to breed another sprite worm, right? Although Liszt was excited, he didn't show it on the surface. He just continued to size up the black nightshade. The black nightshade was already on the verge of death, its leaves were yellow, its rhizome was covered with black spots, and there were a few flower buds on the verge of withering. But when he scanned it with magic eyes, he quickly found that the flow of magic power was very weak, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Without careful observation, he simply couldn't detect any traces of magic power. He was clear, it is unlikely to be a magic ingredient. It is most likely that the black nightshade is going to breed a sprite worm. Poor black nightshade, I don't know what kind of disease it has contracted. It has already been a week, but it still hasn't come back to life. Watching it wither day by day, just like me, it's really hard to bear. Madame Penelope was still nagging as she sprayed the black nightshade with water. "Grandmother, you are very healthy, showing no signs of aging," Liszt said, pretending to be relaxed. "Since you feel sad when you look at the black nightshade, you might as well give it to me to raise. Perhaps the flower town's climate can revive it. If not, then I will give you a new pot of black nightshade. I am very happy that you think so. Liszt, take good care of it." Of course. With ease, a pot of black nightshade, which was suspected to be breeding a sprite worm, was handed over to Liszt. In a hurry to take care of the black nightshade, Liszt quickly took his leave, rendezvoused with his retainer knight, and hurried back to the flower town. When he arrived at the flower town, it was already sunset in the afternoon. The red glow of the sunset rippled on the horizon. The morning glow did not leave the house, but the sunset glow traveled 1,000 miles. Tomorrow would be another bright and sunny day. Liszt didn't take a break and directly ordered Gort, Teacher Gort, mobilize all the serfs to look for black nightshade. Dig them up and send them to the stud farm. Remember, it's best to dig up the roots along with the soil, don't damage the black nightshade's roots. Taking advantage of the fact that it wasn't dark yet, he quickly found a few wild black nightshades near the stud farm. Then, he moved the sick black nightshade out of the pot and planted it next to the wild black nightshade. He also ordered people to fetch some compost and watered it near the roots of the black nightshade. One by one, the wild black nightshade was dug up and planted around the diseased black nightshade, forming a small black nightshade field. "Milord, all of the nightshades that could be found before nightfall are here. Now that the sun has set, the serfs won't be able to find the black nightshade. I'll have the serfs continue to search for it tomorrow." "Sure." Candles and lanterns shone. Gort looked at the black nightshade field and asked curiously, "What's the use of these black nightshades?" Many people knew that black nightshade's berries were edible, but the fruit was too small and the output was too low, so it didn't have much value. Therefore, no one planted them. Most of them grew wild in the fields. Generally, only children liked to rummage through the black nightshade berries. It may be useful, but I can't be sure for the time being. But in any case, transplant all of the black nightshades that can be found here tomorrow. As you wish. Back in the castle. Waiting for dinner. Liszt leaned on a chair in the living room, opened a fragrant coconut, drank the coconut milk, and relaxed his body. Although the Earth Knight had a strong physique, he still felt a little tired after riding a horse all day. However, he was in a good mood and was a little excited. The worries about the seafood market were solved. Later on, just by selling seafood on the Coral Island, he could live a luxurious aristocratic life. The sales channel for the flame mushrooms had been arranged, and now, he just had to wait for the serfs to solve the planting technique. The black tulips were still a month away from the harvest season. The 280 gold coins from the sale of the black pearls had solved the castle's tight financial situation. He was going to buy a few more horses and carriages and expand his caravan. He would strive to expand the seafood business to every small town and reach a scale of 3 gold coins or more per day. Of course, these were the established directions. What really excited him was the black nightshade sprite worm. In addition to the enfeoffment gift, the Count gave him 4 sprite worms, and the Count rewarded him with another sprite worm for discovering the black tulip. The remaining peanut sprite worm, tomato sprite worm, and fragrant coconut sprite worm were all discovered through the smoke missions. Only the black nightshade sprite worm that might exist was personally discovered by him, which gave him a sense of accomplishment. It turned out that even without relying on the smoke missions, he could still obtain his own opportunities. However, it seemed that without magic eyes, it would be very difficult for him to discover the secret of the black nightshade. Magic eyes, on the other hand, were brought to him by the smoke missions. In the end, it seemed that he had borrowed the light of the smoke missions. In any case, this is a good omen. Perhaps in the future, I can often use magic eyes to look for sprite worms that might be hidden on any plant. In his original understanding, sprite worms were very rare. The tulip family had cultivated on the Coral Island for 20 years and had only obtained a little more than 100 sprite worms, which was a very low probability. However, in a small place like the Flower Town, in just half a year, he had already discovered 3 sprite worms. On a trip outside, he had also abducted a black nightshade sprite worm. This could no longer be described as good luck. It can be roughly determined that the probability of sprite worms being conceived is not low. However, due to environmental factors, a large number of sprite worms might have miscarried. There were no smoke missions. The peanut sprite worm had died long ago, and the helpless serfs could not provide the peanut sprite worm with the nutrients it needed. The tomato sprite worm might be conceived, but there was also the possibility that John Shoulderpole would directly pluck the largest tomato and eat the unborn sprite worm. The fragrant coconut sprite worm was hard to say, but with its high position and the threat of the fruit-stealing monkeys, it might also die. As for the current black nightshade sprite worm, without magic eyes to find traces of it, it was doomed to die, unable to be born. Now that I have the smoke missions and magic eyes, the sprite worms that I can find will definitely pour in. With these sprite worms, it is inevitable that I will make a fortune from farming. After the banquet, Liszt summoned the 3 people in charge of the caravan to the castle. He told them about the seafood trade. Coral City, Baihua City, North Valley City, Yulin City, Snake Spear City, and Gravel City. Among the 6 cities of the Coral Island, 5 had already opened trade routes. Only Gravel City was too far away, making it difficult to trade. The Flower Town was at the northeasternmost end of the island, while Gravel City was at the southwesternmost end of the island, separated by more than 100 kilometers. Tomorrow, Tulip Castle will issue a seafood sales decree, which can only be obtained by the Flower Town. Liszt put his hands behind his back and looked at the night view outside the window. There were still few lights in the Flower Town at night. Against the dark background, the stars were especially bright and sparkling. A faintly discernible Milky Way could be seen running through the sky. This probably indicated that this different world still belonged to the Milky Way. Chapter 106. The east coast was only a few kilometers in length. Although there was a lot of seafood, but due to overfishing, it wouldn't take long before the seafood was completely harvested. Liszt was not willing to do something like draining the pond to catch the fish. He was going to implement a fishing moratorium in the Flower Town, or at least a summer moratorium. In other words, during the breeding and growth season of the dog days, the fish resources in the sea would be well protected. Of course. The summer moratorium was only a temporary measure. After the Thorns Ridge was conquered and the wharf was built at Deepwater Bay, he would promote offshore fishing. The shellfish resources at the coast were too little, so he had to protect them. However, the fishery resources at the coast were definitely enough for the entire Coral Island. Currently, there was no wharf, no fishing boats, and no fishermen. He could only develop the coastal fishery. Isaiah, I leave the supervision of the establishment of the Coral City's fishing team to you. I hope that it will be ready as soon as possible. Old Grandet will assist you from the side in selecting the person in charge of the maintenance of the trade routes. Spread them out as soon as possible. I will provide 50 gold coins for the rental of warehouses and the purchase of carriages and horses. Yes, Sir Baron. Isaiah accepted the order. Soon, the caravan's construction plan was discussed. It was divided into two parts. One part was to establish the flower caravan, which would be stationed in the Coral City, with Old Grandet as the caravan captain and Harpagon as the vice-captain. Old Grandet mainly operated the Coral City White Birch City trade route, the Coral City Elm City trade route, the Coral City Gravel City trade route, and the Coral City Snake Spear City trade route. Harpagon was in charge of the fishing team and the castle purchasing team. The purchasing team was to purchase whatever the castle needed and transport it back to the caravan. The other part was to establish the Thorns Caravan, with Sherlock as the caravan captain. The caravan mainly operated the Flower Town North Valley City trade route. The two caravans focused on different things. One focused on the seafood business, providing gold coins for the Flower Town, while the other focused on the daily trade, providing the Flower Town with various daily necessities. He got up early. He exercised and cultivated chi. Liszt was not as diligent as when he was doing the archery mission. Leisure time always made people degenerate quietly, and aristocratic extravagance was wearing away at his fighting spirit. Dosen released the magic. When he came back from walking the dog, he watched as the servants broke the rock thorns and began to pave the road. He sighed in his heart, the life of fighting cocks and walking dogs is much more enjoyable. This Dosen Avenue was 60 meters long, and it would probably be completed by the end of the year. Eating well and training diligently, although Dosen was not yet an adult flying dust dog, his body was already stronger than his mother's. His magic casting was fast and precise, and he executed Liszt's commands meticulously. It was already a very good combat helper and a loyal guard. Gag. Gag. On the windowsill of the castle, ear-piercing screeches accompanied by a familiar melody welcomed Liszt's return. It was Blessed Curls singing at the top of its lungs. This winged peregrine falcon's feathers were getting darker and darker, and its length was much longer than when it was still a fledgling. For this reason, Liszt tied a rope around its ankles. He still hadn't figured out how to train Blessed Curls. It was very likely that he would directly kill it and eat its meat, so as to avoid any trouble. After tying up Dosen, Liszt went to the black nightshade field. The wild black nightshade planted last night was a bit rusty, and had yet to adapt well to the new soil environment. The black nightshade, which was very likely to give birth to a sprite worm, was even more sick than yesterday, and its aura was much weaker. It was on the verge of withering. He released Magic Eyes, carefully observed, and found that the black nightshade's bud was still faintly flickering with magic power. I hope it doesn't die, or else all this effort would have been in vain. Everything that could be done had been done, and the rest could only be left to fate. There were still many wild black nightshades in the small town, which were transplanted one by one. After a whole day, nearly all of the wild black nightshades in the small town were transplanted into the black nightshade field, covering an area of 1 mu. The serfs constantly watered, fertilized, and weeded, striving to use the most meticulous care to keep the black nightshades alive. "Sir, you really should go to the thorns worm stalk shrub and take a look. The thorns there have changed overnight, and they have already grown to half a person's height." Blair gestured with his hand, indicating the craziness of the fast-growing thorns. In just a few days, the thorn seedlings had immediately turned into thorns trees. But he was also a bit puzzled. But, sir, I can't think of any use for them. They don't bear fruit, and they can't be used as wood. Perhaps we can plant thorns on both sides of the road in the thorns ridge. That way, wild beasts and even World of Warcraft should take a detour, not daring to casually trample on them. There is indeed a use. Let's cultivate the shrub first. List also could not think of any good use. Soon after, he inspected the fragrant coconut worm stalk and the cultivation of the flame mushroom. The fragrant coconut worm stalk was still growing, and there was not much movement. The cultivation of the flame mushroom brought him a pleasant surprise. Your wisdom and insight are simply amazing. Sir, after your guidance, the shiitake settlement serfs planted the shiitake and the flame mushroom together, and the flame mushroom successfully grew. I can't figure it out, but the flame mushroom really needs to grow together with shiitake," said Gort excitedly, pointing at the flame mushroom, which had already begun to develop from mycelium to fruiting body. His subordinate's exclamation gave List a sense of accomplishment. He just smiled faintly. After finding the reason, the next step is to cultivate the flame mushroom on a large scale. Teacher Gort, the shiitake settlement must be expanded, as much as possible. If the ingredients for cultivating the flame mushroom are not enough, then have the caravan purchase them from outside. He said in a heavy tone, I need magic ingredients. As you wish, I will squeeze every bit of the serf's physical strength to cultivate an adequate amount of flame mushrooms. Wonderful red mushrooms, they will bring unimaginable wealth to the flower town. Squeezing is a must, but the treatment cannot be lacking. Tell all the shiitake serfs that as long as they can cultivate enough flame mushrooms, then the accompanying shiitake will have their taxes reduced by half. Heavens, that bunch of lowly serfs will go crazy with joy. You are truly the embodiment of benevolence. Of course I am a benevolent lord. However, List's tone changed. You also have to tell those serfs that if any of them are lazy or careless and damage the flame mushrooms, I will let them understand that aristocrats are not only generous and benevolent, but also hold a whip that can tear people apart. Gort nodded. Of course, it is necessary to let them understand this. People were not machines, they were all uniformly diligent. There were always some people who were gluttonous and lazy. After barely getting by, they would not want to do any more work. List did not like such commoners. His way of thinking was already that of a qualified aristocrat. Looking at the Sir Lord's departing figure, Crooked Neck Bob was very disappointed. Anelda's reward, heavens, it was actually obtained by that old bastard Nash. That old bachelor, how could he have cultivated the flame mushrooms before me? He cursed angrily. If it wasn't for List, he wouldn't have had the guts to do so. He was cursing at Nash. The reason was very simple. After the flame mushrooms were successfully cultivated, List rewarded them according to their contributions. Nash was the first to research the appropriate ingredients. Thereupon, List rewarded Nash with a gold coin. Everyone in the shiitake settlement was envious of Nash, especially Bob, who was determined to get the reward. After cursing for a moment. Chapter 107. Another day. The sun rose from the east. On the horse track, List shouted, multiple phantom arrows. The 6 arrows in front and behind issued a fierce air-piercing sound as they chased each other in the air. In an instant, they collided with each other, and then their trajectories became disorderly, not forming a formation. There were only 2 arrows stuck in the target 100 meters away. Failed. List shook his head. Of course, he failed again. His current level of archery was not good enough to display the profoundness of the multiple arrows, multiple phantom arrows. In addition, he had not touched the bow and arrow for several days, so his level even faintly regressed a little. The same was true for the cultivation of chi techniques. Fortunately, he was already very skilled in the most basic part of the multiple arrows, the dual arrows. It was enough for the Earth Knight to be able to effectively display the dual arrows on the battlefield. List glanced at the nearby Marcus, who was drilling the Knight squad. Just yesterday, another young member had cultivated Qi and became his retainer knight. Of the 12 members, half had already become trainee knight with beginner Qi. Once all of them had cultivated Qi, it was time to set out to clear the Thorns Ridge. Before this winter, we must capture the Thorns Ridge. List did not disturb Marcus's teaching. He handed the equipment to the retainer knight and rode back to the castle. Take a bath. Prepare to eat breakfast. Butler Carter stood to the side and reported to him, "Master, the town's baker Rainer and Mrs. Abbey have cooperated and have successfully made a new type of bread. Do you want to try it now? Is that so? The bread is ready, hurry up and bring it." The new bread did not look like the meat floss bread he had imagined, but rather a round steamed bun shape with a cracked surface. Thick cream could be seen flowing in the cracks. "What kind of bread is this?" "It doesn't have a name yet and is waiting for you to name it, Master." Mrs. Abbey said that it is made from flour, eggs, and cream. It is divided into 2 parts, the inside and the outside. The outer skin is a bit troublesome to make, but the cracks after baking are very beautiful. Carter explained the method of making the new bread in detail. List had already picked one up and taken a bite. The aroma of butter mixed with the aroma of bread and lingered in his mouth, stimulating his taste buds. It was much more delicious than plain white bread. This smell, this look. List said directly, "Mr. Carter, tell Mrs. Abbey and Rainer to call it a pineapple bun." Pineapple bun, what an iconic name. In the future, I'll change my breakfast from white bread to pineapple buns. I don't have to change my lunch and dinner. Contact Sherlock, the Thorns Caravan, and Renault. Let's see if we can sell the pineapple buns in North Valley City. List instantly arranged the sales plan for the pineapple buns. After thinking for a moment, he continued, "In addition, tell Rainer and Mrs. Abbey that as a reward for inventing a new type of bread, 10 silver coins each. Also, if you have any ideas, continue to invent. The more flavors of bread, the better." He wanted to say that everyone would be rewarded with a gold coin. Recently, he had made a lot of money from selling black pearls. His wallet was bulging, and he was full of heroic spirit. However, the reward of a gold coin was the same as the reward for discovering a sprite worm and cultivating a magic ingredient, which was too exaggerated. It was just bread to satisfy the appetite of the stomach, nothing more. It was not worth too much reward. Therefore, it was changed to 10 silver coins. Carter left. He slowly tasted the pineapple bun, very satisfied that he was not being generous. Those who are not in charge do not know the price of firewood and rice. The Lord does not have any surplus food at home. Slowly. Faint smoke floated before his eyes, twisting and squirming to form serpentines. Mission completed. Reward, treasure shipwreck. After a while, the text dispersed, the smoke recondensed, and a new mission was issued. Mission: Costo has been distressed recently. Ever since he became the navigational teacher of the night squad, teaching has been difficult. The night squad disdains navigational knowledge. Please correct the youngster's attitude. Reward: Variant Thorns. The treasure shipwreck is finally in hand. The night squad is unwilling to learn navigational knowledge. It seems that there may be a certain connection between the mission reward and the new mission. Probably, only Costo can discover the treasure shipwreck. He shook the bell and called the old butler, who had not gone far. "My lord. Send someone to bring Captain Costo here, I have something to ask him." "Yes, my lord." About half an hour later, Costo arrived at the castle. "My apologies, my lord, I was snorkeling at the beach and was delayed for a while." "Snorkeling?" "I was practicing my swimming and underwater fighting skills. Although I am not a knight, I still desire to fight. How is the night squad learning from you recently? This. Cousteau hesitated. Just say it. Your retainer night squad is very unfriendly towards the learning of navigational knowledge. They don't even like to learn how to swim, let alone teach them how to sail. They always say that a knight relies on a warhorse, not a sailboat. Moreover, Mr. Marcus takes up a lot of the night squad's time. Liszt instantly understood. Although Marcus had been subdued by him and began to follow him loyally, he understood that the sea could also provide wealth. But deep down, he still worshipped the glory of a knight and the warhorse's charge. He felt that ships only needed to send them to fight on land, and there was no need to learn any navigational knowledge. So he transmitted his ideas to the retainer night squad and squeezed into Cousteau's teaching time. As for Marcus, Liszt sighed slightly. It was easy to change a person's identity, but it was a bit difficult to change a person's ideas. Fortunately, he could use the Lord's dignity. He immediately summoned Marcus and the night squad and had them gather at the castle gate. Liszt began to lecture. From today on, all of you will spend half a day learning navigational knowledge from Captain Cousteau. Within 3 days, you must learn how to swim. If you can't learn, 50 lashes. After a week, I will examine your navigational knowledge. If you can't answer a question, 10 lashes. The youngsters were hesitant to speak. Liszt ignored them. He called Marcus into the study. Teacher Marcus, you should know why I'm looking for you, right? Marcus said solemnly, Sir, I don't think the night squad needs to be distracted by learning how to sail. We do need to cross the ocean by ship and go to the continent. Let ordinary sailors operate the ship while we night squad focus on fighting. The Coral Island orders of chivalry also continue this method of fighting. His words had some truth to them. The night squad belonged to the army, but Liszt asked them to become the navy. Naturally, they were unwilling. However, Liszt had his own ideas. How many of the night squad do you think can become an Earth Knight? Or when can they become Earth Knight? I think someone should be able to become an Earth Knight before the age of 20. Philip and Xavier are quite talented. Marcus replied. 2. I have painstakingly trained them, but I can only obtain 2 Earth Knight squads. Then, can they form a squad of night squads and go to the continent's battlefield? I am willing to fight to the death for Sir Ling. I appreciate your kindness, but this is impulsive stupidity. Flower Town is still developing. I have already purchased a large number of serfs. In the future, I will select enough outstanding youngsters to train. Now, what I need are instructors who have mastered all kinds of basic abilities, not good-for-nothings who are proficient in fighting. What do you mean? Teacher Marcus, some of these night squads will become the backbone of the night squad, while others will helm ships in the future and transport my night squad to the continent to compete for minerals. Divide the work and perform their respective duties. Do you understand? Liszt's expression was indifferent, but his eyes were stern. Chapter 108. Liszt simply punished Marcus by deducting his salary for a month. His main purpose was to help Cousteau complete the smoke mission. So he asked the members of the night squad to learn how to swim in 3 days. To swim, they must go into the sea, which may bring them into contact with the shipwrecked treasure. He wanted to know what the shipwrecked treasure was as soon as possible. Was it full of gold coins or bright jewels? Or was there a dragon egg hidden there? But then again, is the dragon born from the dragon egg? In the Night novel, there were many different opinions about the origin of the dragon, and there had been no accurate answer. He asked the Count, but the Count did not know where the dragon came from. This was an unsolved mystery. The night squad soon began their swimming lessons. Liszt did not go to patrol. It would not be too late to come back when there were clues about the shipwrecked treasure. He was going to the thorns worms worm stalk bushes. The reward of the new mission was a mutant type of thorns. He wanted to check to see if he could get the reward in advance. the previous fast-growing type of thorns was not a magic ingredient. This time, the mutant type of thorns was likely to be a magic ingredient. There were large patches of thorns half the height of a person. But disappointingly, after casting Magic Eye, there was no trace of magic power. No magic ingredient. Maybe the mission has not been completed, so the magic ingredient has not successfully mutated? He called out the smoke mission and found that the mission had not been completed. In other words, the teenager's attitude had not been corrected. Ideological education is not enough. It seems that I have to go to the seaside and see who is still resisting sailing lessons. He turned to his valet, Thomas, and said, "Go back to the castle, get my whip, and then go to the seaside to find me." "Yes, master." Ideological education was not very effective just by talking about it. He must use the whip to let them achieve the unity of spirit and flesh in pain and remember the lesson. Crack. Crack. With a gloomy face, Liszt whipped the two young night boys who were afraid of the sea. The residents of a coastal island town were afraid of going into the water. Between the whip and the sea, the two young night boys finally chose the sea. Under Costo's guidance, they began to paddle like dogs. Liszt summoned the smoke mission and finally saw a change. Mission complete. Reward: poisonous mutated fast-growing thorns. Mission: the newly rooted black nightshade doesn't seem to be able to adapt to the flower town's soil. Although it is nutritious, but it is unable to absorb it very quickly. The magic power that was as gentle as water was draining away bit by bit. It might be dying soon, please help it gather magic power. Reward: 1 sprite worm. Nightshade was included in the smoke mission. Liszt was convinced that it was indeed giving birth to a sprite worm, but the problem was very serious. It is not acclimatized, unable to absorb sufficient nutrients, and losing its magic power, indicating that the sprite worm is about to miscarry. How should I help it condense its magic power? It's not Dosen, who can release magic just by stimulating it. He was stumped by the question. Just then, Costo, who was teaching the night squad swimming lessons, suddenly swam back from the sea and shouted, Sir Lord, I found a sunken ship." He trotted over to Liszt. "A sunken ship? It is the wreckage of a sunken ship not far ahead, half of it is buried in sand." "A sunken ship?" Liszt retracted his train of thought and quickly responded, "Captain Costo, salvage it. I need help. I will have Gort support you. How long will it take for you to salvage it? Please rest assured, the sea at the sunken ship's location is not deep. When the tide is low, it will only be about 5 meters deep. At that time, I can dive into the water and tie up the sunken ship, while the people on the shore can directly pull it out of the mud. When will the tide be low today?" "Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Get ready." The sunken ship treasure trove had entered a countdown. Liszt felt relieved. Unable to salvage it for the time being, Liszt once again returned to the thorns wormstalk thicket. He was looking for the poisonous mutated fast-growing thorns rewarded by the smoke mission. Poisonous mutated, does it mean poisonous thorns? It can be directly called fast-growing poisonous thorns. Still not a magic ingredient. It was a bit disappointing. But Liszt felt that perhaps the reward was far more than that. This seems to be a chain mission about the evolution of Thorn's worm. At first, it was a fast-growing thorns reward, but now there are fast-growing poisonous thorns. This thorns bush has become more and more interesting. Returning to the bushes, he did not cast Magic Eye again. In the morning, he used Magic Eye to find the magic ingredient, and now he wanted to find the poisonous thorns. Such a large bush was full of thorns, and there was a feeling of not knowing where to start. He did not know what the fast-growing poisonous thorns looked like. He could only mobilize his retainer knight, look for unusual thorns. Remember, don't touch them at will, they may be poisonous. The 6th retainer knight took the order and began to search in the bushes. Liszt and his valet, Thomas, were also searching. This search went on for several hours. In total, he searched the bushes 3 times and even asked the servants to send food over. Of course, List did not look for long. In fact, he hid under the shade of a nearby wild fruit tree, enjoyed the ice cream sent by the servants, and watched the others work. Finally, in the afternoon, under the scorching sun, the serfs who were sent to look for unusual thorns found a special thorn. This thorn was mixed in the bushes. It was not a normal cyan stem with small thorns, but a stem with purple stripes. The purple stripes added a touch of mystery to it. Moreover, every small thorn grew on top of the purple stripes, and was also purple. Is this a fast-growing poisonous thorns? List decided to give it a try. He asked someone to bring a rabbit raised in the castle, and then used the small thorns on the purple stripes to cut the rabbit. The small thorns broke in an instant, and purple juice gushed out, mixing with the rabbit's wound. After a moment, the rabbit twitched and fell to the ground, dead. Tisk, tsk, tsk. Sir, this thorn is highly poisonous. The rabbit didn't even last a quarter of an hour. If it had been a human, I'm afraid they wouldn't have survived after being cut by such thorns. Blair, who had been in charge of recording the growth of the thorn's worm stalk, clicked his tongue in amazement. List was satisfied with the experiment. Reward this serf with 10 silver coins. The serf thanked him profusely and left. The other serfs also thanked him and left. Although they didn't receive a reward, each of them received a copper coin as payment. They earned a copper coin for less than 2 hours of easy work. What a lucky job. Looking at the fast-growing poisonous thorns, List already thought of how to use them. Blair, I have a new task for you. Please instruct me. Vigorously cultivate a batch of fast-growing poisonous thorns. In the future, I will plant fast-growing poisonous thorns on both sides of the road in the Thorns Ridge. My castle also needs to be decorated with deterrent green fences. Chapter 109. The East Coast. The tide receded, leaving a large number of seashells, starfish, crabs, and other seafood on the beach soaked in seawater. Fishermen had already begun to fish out the seafood. List rode on Black Dragon. He watched a large group of barefoot people bustling about on the beach. They were busy connecting ropes, finding practically all the ropes in the town and twisting them into one. Costo dived to the location of the sunken ship and tied the rope to the keel of the sunken ship. He swam back and beckoned to the crowd. Pull. We can pull. Dozens of serfs, like trackers on the Volga River, took heavy steps and instantly tightened the ropes. Under Gort's command, they shouted slogans and exerted their strength. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The slogans came one after another. The ropes tightened around their shoulders, relaxing and tightening in accordance with the rhythm of their bodies. Step by step, they sunk their feet deep into the yellow sand. Some of them were old men in their 50s, some were young teenagers, doing the same work. Their clothes were tattered, their faces were dark, their hair was stuck to their foreheads, and sweat was dripping down. They really looked like the trackers on the Volga River. But they were not. List had seen Repin's famous painting trackers on the Volga River. It was in the language textbook. In the painting, the trackers towed boats by the river all year round. Life had ravaged them to the point of numbness. The flower town's temporary trackers, on the other hand, had smiles on their faces, even though the sun was blazing above their heads. That was because each person could earn a copper coin for this trip as a hauler. The Sir Lord who came from the Great Tulip Castle was generous and benevolent, bringing them plenty of food and jingling copper coins, and even silver and gold coins. Life had never been so full of hope. 1, 2, 3. Harder. Gort yelled from the side, "You lazy guys, haven't you eaten?" On the surface of the sea, Costo kept diving and surfacing, shouting, "More strength, the hull has been pulled out." More strength, the bow will be pulled out." He shouted a few times. Cousteau shouted again, "It's a success. The sunken ship has been successfully pulled out of the mud and sand." After they pulled it out, the trackers became even more relaxed. They easily dragged the wrecked ship to the beach. The sunken ship covered in green algae could no longer be seen. There was only one mast left, and it was broken. The hull was full of holes, and from time to time, crabs would crawl out. "Sir, the sunken ship has been salvaged," Gort said excitedly. Cousteau also came over and said, "It's an old brig. Judging from its shape, it should be a ship from 100 years ago. Sir Lord, this should be a ship of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. 100 years ago, only the Grand Duchy could build a brig." Liszt rode on his horse and circled around the sunken ship. A sunken ship from 100 years ago? Then, it's a merchant ship? Or a warship? It should be a merchant ship. The cabin is sealed and used to transport goods. Then what are we waiting for? Teacher Gort, get someone to dismantle this 100-year-old cargo ship. I want to see what's left in its hold. As you wish. Building a ship was difficult, but dismantling it was quick. After a while, the cabin was smashed open. Some patrolmen went in and pulled out some cloth that had been soaked in seawater, as well as some grain remains. This was probably a merchant ship that transported cloth and grain, and it had sunk for some unknown reason. Could it be that this is all there is to the treasure of the sunken ship? Liszt expressed his disbelief. As expected. One of the patrolmen suddenly shouted, "There are chests, there are a few chests here. They are intact, and the locks have not been opened. Quickly move the chests out. Give me a hammer, the chests are stuck in the bones of the ship. I have to hammer the wood." After tossing and turning, a total of 5 large chests were dragged out of the cabin of the sunken ship and placed on the beach. Cousteau looked at the chests a few times and came to a conclusion, "Sir Lord, this should be redwood. It is strong and durable, and it has obviously been waterproof. There must be something valuable in the chests." Liszt revealed a smile, "In that case, move them to my castle." "That's right, everyone who participated in the salvage this time will be paid double. Captain Cousteau found the sunken ship, so he will be rewarded with a gold coin." He had not yet seen what was in the chests. He immediately began to distribute the rewards. The purpose was to encourage his subjects to discover, explore, and contribute more good things to him. At the same time, this gold coin was also to encourage Cousteau to recruit apprentice sailors. He wanted to see if he could really raise a group of qualified sailors. 5 large chests, each as big as a desk, were neatly placed in the hall of the castle. The locks were probably made of brass and had already rusted. Carter guarded the chests and forbade the servants from approaching. Therefore, the maids and serving men could only crowd at the entrance of the hall, curiously sizing up the chests. "Debbie, what do you think is inside? Could there be mermaids? Maybe singing demons? There are singing demons in the sea. The chests are quite old. Even if there were mermaids and singing demons inside, they would have long since become bones." "Not necessarily. I heard that mermaids can live for hundreds of years. I guess it is full of gold coins, no, dragon coins. A chest full of dragon coins can buy the entire flower town. Jim, think about it. Even if the entire flower town, including you and I, were sold, we would not be able to sell a few dragon coins. A chest full of dragon coins can buy the entire Coral Island." Carter turned around and berated the chattering servants, "Have you forgotten the etiquette of aristocracy? Do your jobs well and don't pay attention to matters that have nothing to do with you, understand?" Mrs. Morrison also came downstairs. She swept the maids with a glance and fixed her gaze on Maggie. "Master's study's hygiene is not up to standard. There are even debris in the corners. Maggie, this is your dereliction of duty. You need to clean it again. Yes, Mrs. Morrison. Maggie nodded in agreement and hurriedly went to get the cleaning tools. Under the rebuke of the two stewards, the servants did not dare to act rashly and returned to their posts. Only Carter and Morrison were left in the hall. Master hasn't returned yet? Master went to the black nightshade field. The black nightshade in the field is not very good. Master is trying to find a solution. I went to see the black nightshade. It is indeed not good. Mr. Carter, do you think it can still come back to life? I believe it can. Carter smiled slightly, because Master will save it. The glory of the night favors the flower town, and even more favors the Master. List did not know that his steward trusted him so much. At this time, he was looking at the black nightshade, which was on the verge of death, frowning as he pondered on how to help it condense magic power. The mission said that magic power as gentle as water is flowing away. Does it mean that the black nightshade needs to be replenished with water-attributed magic power? In the fief, only I and Marcus have attributed chi, but they are of the fire and wind attributes respectively. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck. He thought of the black pearls. He had 14 water-attributed black pearls in the gem space. Perhaps I can grind the black pearls and sprinkle them on the black nightshade's roots so that it can absorb water-attributed magic power by itself. I don't know if this is the right idea, but at present, this is the only way. Making a desperate attempt, he immediately took out a fist-sized black pearl, grinded it, and buried it in the black nightshade's roots. Chapter 110. The box was heavy and light. The lock was strong. But this did not stop List from breaking the lock on the lightest box with just a sword imbued with chi. The lock was unlocked, and the box was opened. There was no one else in the hall. Carter sent them away, and he walked out himself. There might be valuable treasures in the box, but as a servant, he should not care. List was very satisfied with Carter's action. Although he believed that Carter was loyal, he could not believe that all the servants were loyal. If they saw a great treasure and told others, it would be troublesome. Don't show your wealth. This principle must be understood. This box is very light, different from the other boxes. What could it contain? Or is there nothing inside? List reached out and slowly lifted the lid. Suddenly, the bright light almost blinded his eyes. The box was filled with strong reflective white metal ores. One by one, the light from the window was reflected everywhere. He blinked his eyes. After adapting to the scattered light, he carefully looked at the white metal ores in the box. He took out an ore and weighed it in his hand. It was almost light, but the texture was definitely metal. It was cold and very hard. He had never seen such a light metal before. To his knowledge, metals were generally very heavy. Of course, he also knew that there was a very light metal, lithium, which was twice as light as water and could float on water. But even lithium was heavier than the metal ore in his hand. Now he felt that he was not holding a piece of metal ore, but a piece of foam. He squeezed hard, but the metal ore did not move at all. When he slashed with his sword, he could not cut it. He could only leave a slight mark. It is not foam, nor is it plastic. He looked at the ore in his hand and recalled the night novels he had read. He raised his eyebrows and gradually smiled. I have probably guessed what kind of metal this is. It is as light as a feather and as hard as iron. It is the magic metal, mithril. In this world, the metals were also gold, silver, copper, iron, and aluminum. However, there were also a few special metals that were compatible with magic and were very good magic conductors. They were also essential materials for creating magic equipment. Currently, there were 3 known types of magic metals: mithril, adamantine, and orichalcum. Mithril was light as a feather, adamantine was indestructible, and orichalcum was indestructible. These 3 magical metals also originated from dragons. It was said that there was a mithril dragon in the unsetting Radiance Empire. In the knight novels, the silver orders of chivalry often appeared and followed the protagonist into battle. The standard equipment for the members of the Silver Order of Chivalry was a set of shiny mithril magic armor, and they came and went like the wind. Mithril is very valuable, even more valuable than gold. This chest of mithril ore is worth at least 1 dragon coin. List licked his lips in disappointment. The reputation of the treasure was well deserved. He quickly used the space gem to store all the mithril ore, leaving only an empty box. Just this box of mithril ore alone could be said to be a bountiful harvest. However, he had no intention of selling it. He would keep it and use it to forge equipment when he needed it in the future. Touching the red blood sword at his waist, he felt that the red blood sword should also contain a small amount of mithril. Its magic conduction ability was better than that of ordinary adamantine weapons. Even if there was no dragon gem embedded, a weapon mixed with mithril would at least be a magic weapon. Now, let's see what's in the second chest. I wonder if there's adamantine or orichalcum. List raised his sword, gently cut off the rusty copper lock, and opened the lid. The stench hit his face. He almost vomited from the stench. Inside, there were many books stacked neatly. It was unknown how long the books had been stored. The stench from the thick bast paper could be said to be suffocating. List held his breath. List looked at the book at the top. The name was handwritten Serpentines, Rudolph's Alchemy Diary. Alchemy Diary? List's eyes flickered slightly. Alchemists were probably a legendary profession. They might be equivalent to chemists or alchemists. Legend has it that they could use magical alchemy methods to refine ordinary stones into gold. Whoever mastered the mysteries of alchemy would have wealth comparable to that of a country. In knight novels, the frequency of alchemists' appearances was also quite high. It was just that in reality, there were many people with the title of alchemist, but they did not show true alchemy. They just swindled food and drink. List, who had studied physics, did not believe in the existence of alchemy. Of course. In this different world with magic power, God knows if there would really be alchemy. For example, now he saw a diary with the title Alchemy. It can't really record alchemy, right? Is this to let me grasp the rhythm of alchemy? Am I going to reach the peak of life so soon? List felt his heart begin to beat faster. The profession of alchemist, compared to the top existences such as Dragon Knight, Dragon Lord, Archmage, and Dragon Slayer, was absolutely not much worse. With money, you could really do whatever you wanted. However, just as he was about to touch the book, the Rudolph's Alchemy Diary, which still looked clear, was instantly broken, and then rippled into powder. List's fingers directly passed through the powder and grabbed nothing. In his heart, he did not know whether to say it or not. In just the blink of an eye, the whole box of books turned into powder. With a light touch, it scattered into a pile. No longer any handwriting could be distinguished, nor could the appearance of the book be seen. The wind blew in from the window, directly rolling up the powder and flying together with the stench. After being stunned for a while, List came back to his senses. He clutched his chest and almost vomited blood. My alchemy. The thick parchment book that had been stored for a long time had already decayed. The diary that recorded alchemy also turned into ashes. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. Although he felt that alchemy was unlikely to exist, when a trace of the possibility of alchemy's existence slipped away from his hands, the sense of loss still hit his heart painfully. The box that should have been full of treasures of knowledge had become a pile of waste. He sighed. Reluctantly, he suppressed his uncomfortable mood. Forget it, I was lucky to get it, but if I lose it, it's my fate. Who knows if alchemy is really recorded in the diary? It was an unexpected harvest, and losing it is not enough to shake my mentality. A box of mithril ore is already valuable enough. After comforting himself, he carefully lifted his sword and opened the third box. It was also a book. The top was placed with the cover of 5 books. List learned his lesson and did not directly touch them, but carefully remembered the cover of each book. Steel Ridge Kingdom World of Warcraft Guide, Close Contact with Multi-Horned Magic Rhinoceros, Interesting Stories of the Golden Flash Tower, Colorful Mushrooms of the Red Monkey Forest, Fox Manor on a Rainy Night. The covers of these books were not handwritten serpentines, but printed serpentines. Obviously, they were published and sold on the market. Golden Flash Tower? Red Monkey Forest? Fox Manor? He had never heard of these three places, but he could conclude that they were all places of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. Because only the Steel Ridge Kingdom and its vassal states used serpentines. Including Rudolph, who wrote the Alchemy Diary, they should all be people of the Steel Ridge Kingdom. List carefully reached out to touch the book, hoping to open a page. However, he still failed. As soon as the book was touched, it immediately turned into powder, unable to be preserved. Chapter 111. The last two boxes did not contain books. To List's surprise, one box contained all kinds of jade and the other box contained all kinds of crystals, jade and crystal. The value of these two boxes is definitely not lower than the value of mithril ore. He picked up a milky white jade. The regret of the disappearance of the books was somewhat diluted. Jade and crystal could be regarded as types of gems. But the origins of the two were completely different. Jade came from the earth, like saltpeter and sulfur, which were naturally produced by the earth. Crystal, on the other hand, came from dragons, which were associated with the production of gems by dragons. Dragons could produce gems, which had extraordinary magic power. But gem mines were rare, and more often crystal mines were associated with gem mines. Topaz was around topaz, and ruby was around ruby. Crystals also contained magic power, but compared to gems, crystal power was less. Aristocrats liked to use crystal-carved drinking cups. In List's castle, there was a set of such crystal goblets used to entertain distinguished guests. Crystals were also commonly used to make magic lamps, which could be lit day and night until the magic power contained in them was exhausted. Every castle with a name had a crystal lamp. Crystals were also excellent accessories for aristocratic ladies. A crystal necklace could add a lot of elegance to a lady. Jade originating from the earth, also called magic jade, was also a stone with magic power. But the magic power contained in it had been highly integrated with the jade itself, making it difficult to develop and use, and unable to make magic items. But jade was the best food for sprites. During the transplanting of worm stalks, sprites had to rely on jade to maintain their lives. When contracting sprite worms, jade was also used as bait, and jade was used to make containers for sprites to live in, which would increase the probability of sprites' evolution. Therefore, the value of jade was not lower than that of crystal. List opened the gem space. After putting a box of jade and a box of crystal inside, List shook the bell and called the butler, "Mr. Carter, I have put away the treasures in the boxes. Most of them have been severely damaged over the years, leaving only a few scraps. Have someone move them away and throw them away." He carefully rummaged through the boxes of books. The books were all rotten, leaving no recognizable writing. This was a drawback of thick bast paper, which could not be stored for too long. List felt that the lack of historical records in this world must have something to do with the thick bast paper. During the manufacturing process, the thick bast paper would undergo an acidification process so that it could be written on smoothly. However, things that were slightly acidic were prone to chemical reactions and were difficult to preserve for too long. That was how he understood it. Although there are some regrets, overall, the treasures from the shipwreck have made me a windfall. Very good. List thought to himself. His mood gradually became better. Therefore, he asked the kitchen to hold a barbecue for the banquet. Gort, Marcus, and the others had also come to participate. They also knew that List had obtained a bountiful harvest today, but they rationally did not ask what the treasures were. For 3 consecutive days. List was paying close attention to Nightshade's condition. The transplanted black nightshade had already adapted to the new soil and environment and was beginning to regain its vitality. The green leaves were full of vigor, those that should be blooming continued to bloom, and those that should be bearing fruit continued to bear fruit. Only the black nightshade, which gave birth to the sprite worm, remained in a dying state, its magic power intermittently giving the impression that it could die at any time. However, it did not die, and was just persevering. There was no change in the smoke mission, which meant that the mission had not been completed. The black pearl's magic power should be sufficient. I can see signs of magic power emanating from under the soil. I can't use any more strength. Black nightshade, little bug, whether or not you can survive depends on your desire to live. For this smoke mission, he could only wait for Nightshade to die, the mission would fail, or for Nightshade to come back to life, the mission would be completed. List stood up. He looked in the direction of the castle, where a yellow-gray horse was galloping towards the castle. Marcus is back. He mounted Black Dragon and returned to the castle, just in time to bump into Marcus, who was standing at the gate. Teacher Marcus, did the trip go smoothly? Everything went smoothly, sir. Tomorrow, the Crystal Craftsman Brad will follow the Flower Caravan's transport team to the Flower Town to serve you for a month. It's been hard on you, Teacher Marcus. List nodded. After obtaining a large number of crystals, he came up with the idea of making a telescope. Glass was the most suitable material for making telescopes, but glass production was relatively complicated. For the time being, List did not have the ability to produce glass, so he could only use crystals to make binoculars. It was very simple to make a pair of telescopes out of transparent white crystal. The Coral City had craftsmen who specialized in making crystal ornaments. These craftsmen might not be able to make crystal lamps, but it was absolutely not a problem for them to polish concave and convex mirrors. Are the two lenses of a telescope concave or convex? There were some physics that List had forgotten. He remembered that a monocular consisted of two lenses, which could be lengthened and shortened to different distances. By hiring a crystal craftsman for a month, he should be able to make a good pair of telescopes. The Crystal Craftsman Brad. He arrived the next day as scheduled. He was a bald middle-aged man with a thick beard. He spoke in a low, muffled voice. Respected Baron of the Flower Town, Brad sends his regards. Brad, do you know why I hired you? Mr. Marcus said that you want me to make a few crystal products for you. Yes, help me make a batch of mirrors. List handed him a few pieces of white crystal. White crystal was a mineral associated with white gemstones. As for what kind of dragon produced white gemstones, List did not know. There was a lot of information about dragons, but most of it was vague. Those countries with dragons would always hide their dragons mysteriously. Is this white crystal? I can feel the magic power contained in it. Brad was a freelance craftsman, as well as a trainee knight. He had chi. Craftsmen who made gems and crystals must have chi. List shook out a piece of thick bast paper. I need you to make these pieces of white crystal into mirrors. The surface must be very smooth, the thickness must be uniform, and the shape must be circular. There are two sizes of mirrors, but the thickness can vary. The structure of convex and concave lenses was drawn on the paper. List could not figure out which focal length of the convex and concave lenses were suitable to be combined into telescopes. He simply had the crystal craftsman make a few more pieces, and when the time came, he could combine them one by one to experiment. As you wish, Sir Baron. Then you will stay in the Flower Town. If you can finish grinding the mirrors ahead of time, you can leave ahead of time. The salary will still be the 1 gold coin promised before. Crystal craftsmen were relatively high-end craftsmen and usually had a good income. It was normal for them to earn 20 to 30 silver coins a month. If List wanted to hire them to work, he had to come up with a higher salary. Chapter 112. The binoculars were still being sharpened. The black nightshade was still half dead. The fragrant coconut sprite worm was still gestating. The fast-growing poisonous thorns of the thorns worm stalk shrubs were still sprouting new seedlings every day. Houses were still being built sporadically in the settlements, as well as in the 4 districts of the small town. The road construction was still ongoing. The castle's Dosan Avenue was still under construction every day. Shooting arrows, practicing spear shooting. Man and horse charging as one. List's life was very fulfilling every day. Mrs. Abby's cooking skills had evolved rapidly. Not only could she make pineapple buns, but she had also learned several new cuisines. The Thorns caravan traveled back and forth to the North Valley City every day to purchase supplies needed by the castle. As long as they had gold coins, they could buy anything they wanted. Silently nourish everything. I have been in this world for almost half a year, yet I have not done anything spectacular, nor have I carried out any bold and decisive construction. However, under my guidance, the Flower Town is still on the path of rapid development. The territory may still be barren, but at least it has a new look. Previously, he only had 2 assistants, Gort and Marcus. Now, Gort was the administrative officer, Marcus was the temporary night captain, Isaiah was the financial officer, Blair was the legal officer, and Karl Hammerstein was the defense officer. Old Grandette was the captain of the Flower Caravan, Harpagon was the vice captain, Sherlock was the captain of the Thorns Caravan, and Costo was the captain of the Flower. He had already formed a team. The sprite worms had grown from 4, tulip sprite worm, corn sprite worm, alfalfa sprite worm, and thorn sprite worm, to 7 sprite worms. There were also the tomato sprite worm, wheat sprite worm, and peanut sprite worm. There were still 2 sprite worms waiting to give birth, fragrant coconut sprite worm and black nightshade sprite worm. The number of horses in the small town, including the horses of the new officials and their families, had grown from 15 to 7 pregnant mares. 2 more foals and 8 older horses had been bought. There were also 12 carriages allocated to the caravan. There was not enough pasture in the horse farm, so fodder had to be purchased from outside. In addition, potions, smoke grass, fruit-stealing monkeys, seafood, only the population growth was slow. From 1991 to the present 2074, there was only an increase of 83 people. However, at the end of September, 500 serfs would be transported over to replenish the labor force. Actually, the biggest gains are all on me. List leaned back in his chair and leisurely sipped on a cup of milk tea without any additives. Behind him was a fruit tree outside the castle. It was a green apple tree that produced very little fruit and tasted sour. At least it could shed some shade. He was in a good mood. Perhaps Mrs. Morrison's skills had improved, or perhaps the quality of the milk produced by the pregnant cows had improved. Either way, the milk tea was getting better and better. Even after drinking the milk tea, he could feel that the nutrition in the milk tea made his body feel especially comfortable, and even his spirit became excited. It swept away the laziness of the hot summer. Dosan is my good bodyguard. His rockthorns are very powerful, so blessed curls can probably be saved for meat. Space gems are the most priceless treasures. Mithril ores, jades, crystals, and black pearls should be valued in dragon coins. The red blood sword is a gem weapon, and there's also the sun's child floating bottle. His personal wealth, if measured, might already be second to none in Coral Island. I also learned the Chi's secret skill, Magic Eye. Although I don't know why Vulture Knight Stephen hid magic eyes in a book, but I should thank him. This auxiliary Chi's secret skill is far better than any powerful Chi's secret skill. Dosan was running around in joy. Woof woof. Thomas, who was holding the rope behind Dosan, was sweating profusely as he ran. With Dosan's current strength, Thomas, an ordinary person, had no way to hold him back. List moved his gaze away from Dosan. He looked at the small garden next to the castle. A maid was cleaning up the dried meat in the small garden. The black and white maid uniform looked very pleasing to the eye. "Is that little Lily?" Liszt was a bit far away and could not see the maid's facial expression, but he could judge from her figure. Little Lily, the kitchen maid, was the tallest maid in the castle. She was about 1.7 meters tall. He remembered the first time he saw little Lily. At that time, the 17-year-old girl was still a thin bamboo pole figure. Liszt did not know if it was because of the good food and living in the castle, but now he could see that she had breasts and her buttocks were a bit more perky than before. The girl has grown up. The picture of a busy maid is really pleasing to the eye. After sighing with emotion, he retracted his gaze and began to operate the qi in his body. Just now, there was some restlessness in his body, as if he wanted to express his respect to the maid. His body was also developing rapidly. His height had increased by quite a bit, and he was estimated to be 1.83 meters tall. The Earth Knight Marcus was a standard 1.86 meters tall. Standing next to him, Liszt was not much different. The Count was about 1.81 meters tall. His deceased mother, Melissa, was said to be a tall beauty. Therefore, Liszt inferred that he could probably continue to grow taller. It would not be a problem to surpass Marcus. Perhaps he could eventually reach 1.9 meters. The restlessness was difficult to quell. Liszt simply stood up, pulled out the red blood sword hanging from his waist, and began to practice fiery dragon drill. In a flash, it was September. The Count had returned from the Blue Dragon Island and gathered all his followers to go to Tulip Castle for a meeting. As a baron of the Flower Town, Liszt naturally had to go. The Coral Island system was not huge. There were 2 viscounts, 16 baron, 82 lord knight, 1 life viscount, levis, and several life baron. Life knighthood was a title outside the system. It enjoyed the same treatment as a noble title, but it did not have a territory and was not hereditary. Some countries had it, while others did not. In the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, life knighthood was generally granted to the adult heirs of a large family. When they came of age, but their father had not yet died, it was not their turn to inherit the title. Some were even in their 40s and had not yet inherited the title, which was a bit embarrassing. As a result, life knighthood came into being. Of course, some wizards, craftsmen with contributions, and even wealthy merchants might be conferred the title of life knighthood. The Grand Duke has issued an expansion order. In autumn, he will cooperate with the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom to attack the coast of the Eagle Kingdom. After meeting with Liszt, Levis informed him of the news. Father has decided to accept the expansion order and participate in the war. "Are you going as well?" asked Liszt. "Of course, I have to go. This is a test for me. I need to prove that I can inherit Father's will and be favored by the glory of the night." Levis was not nervous, only excited. "The Grand Duke has arranged for Father to cooperate with Marquis Roderick, while I will act as the liaison officer to coordinate the 2 orders of chivalry." Marquis Roderick? Liszt recalled that Madame Penelope had said that Levis was pursuing the other party's daughter. What is the name of the Marquis's daughter? Chapter 113. The surnames of great nobles were always very elegant. They were both Marquis clans, but the Taro family's surname was Long Taro. Compared to the Golden Wheatear clan's surname was Golden Wheatear, there was a difference in grade. This was also a display of their foundation. A few decades ago, the Golden Wheat family's surname was still Golden Wheat. This was a very powerful family. The reason why their surname wasn't Barley or Wheat was because their family not only had the Wheat Great Sprite, but also the Barley Great Sprite. Before the Grand Duchy of Sapphire was established, the Golden Wheat family had already relied on grain sales to rise to power. Later, they followed the Sapphire family and established a country, becoming the first Marquis family in the Grand Duchy. But just like the Small Kerchief clan and the Big Kerchief clan, the Golden Wheat clan had also experienced a split several decades ago. The branch that had the Wheat Sprite was conferred the title of Earl due to their military exploits, and they changed their surname to Golden Wheat Grains. The branch that possessed the Great Barley Sprite inherited the title and changed their surname to Golden Barley. Every time the family name changes, it meant the development of the clan, the improvement of the bloodline, and the change of status. If one day, I can also nurture a great tulip sprite and rely on my military achievements to be conferred the title of Earl, then, according to the habits of the nobles, perhaps the Tulip family will change their name to Red Tulip, and I will change my name to Black Tulip. List Black Tulip? Sometimes, List would indulge in idle fantasies. Then, my dear brother, I wish you all the best. After finding out the name of the Marquis daughter, List smiled and gave his blessings. I will succeed. Unlike cousin Meopal, Loria and I have been corresponding for half a year, and I know she has already noticed me. What I need to do now is to beat the other competitors with an excellent performance. Cousin Meopal, it's purely unrequited love. The princess has many guests. As Levis spoke, he did not forget to make fun of Meopal. How should she put it? Her cousin's character, appearance, and family background were all impeccable, but he fell in love with a dissolute princess. List had a good impression of Meopal, so he didn't go along with Levis's teasing. Right, brother, the black pearls I sold you last time, did you forge them into magic equipment? It's a success. The magician carved a special magic rune on it, and then it became a special item that can silence the wind. Silence the wind? The water magic in the black pearl can suppress the flow of wind, especially wind magic. I saw with my own eyes that the wind blade released by the magician dissipate when it was 5 meters away from the black pearl. Although it is a little big, it can be used to defend against sneak attacks from wind do-chi. He looked at List and continued, especially for a knight like Marcus who has the wind combat aura. He likes to practice archery the most. He wants to use his combat aura to control his bow and arrows to complete a fatal sneak attack. Now, I don't need to be nervous when I meet an elite among the Wind Chi Earth Knight. It seems that the black pearl is very useful. I always feel that I sold it cheaply. 280 gold coins is not a small amount. It can only silence the wind, nothing more. If it could silence all magic, then it would be really valuable. Levis moved closer. Do you still have any black pearls? As far as I know, a pearl oyster can take out several pearls, and a giant clam should be the same. You must have some black pearls in your hands. List didn't answer and asked back, it can silence the wind up to 5 meters? Yes. Such an ability made List's mind become active. He sold Levis a bowl-sized black pearl that could cover an area with a radius of 5 meters and silence all wind. If it was replaced with 2 basketball-sized black pearls, how big of an area could it silence? If it was replaced with a wash-basin-sized black pearl, how big of an area could it silence? I'm afraid it would have a radius of tens to hundreds of meters. Such an ability might only be used on the battlefield to avoid sneak attacks from wind chi. But if it was used on the sea, think about it. If the flower was equipped with a wash-basin-sized black pearl that could silence the wind around the entire ship, it would be equivalent to not suffering from storms at all. Then, sailing on the sea would not be like walking on flat ground. Even if the waves could not be calmed, the wind would still be silenced, and the threat would be greatly reduced. In an instant, he made a decision. The wash-basin-sized and basketball-sized black pearl must not be sold. This is a necessity to arm my own fleet in the future. So he replied in a casual tone, of course, I still have one. I originally intended to keep it as a collection. Black pearls are not a rare treasure that can be obtained easily. Sell me another one. You want another one? Yes, I intend to make it into a new magic equipment and then give it to Relia. What do you think, isn't it very thoughtful and sincere? List said casually, women usually have no resistance to jewelry. I think it's a good idea. How many gold coins are you going to pay for it? I still have a black pearl of the same size as the one I sold you, as well as a few smaller black pearls, 280 gold coins. This was the price of the previous black pearl, and Levis shouted the same price. Silencing all wind, with such an effect, 280 gold coins can't be bought. Liszt said unhurriedly. Now it was the seller's market. It was time to raise the price. After a long talk. In the end, Liszt sold another black pearl for 430 gold coins. Liszt, your heart is black, just like those merchants. It doesn't matter whether my heart is black or not. What matters is that you can let Rolia see your red heart, isn't it? At the luncheon, the Count made an announcement about the expansion order. Then he began to call for followers to follow him into battle. This was nothing new. Every year or two, an expansion order would be issued. Therefore, in one afternoon, all his followers were called. The Count himself dispatched the most elite Coral Island orders of chivalry, a total of 10 knight squads, a total of 130 people, as well as a temporarily formed garrison orders of chivalry, a total of 15 knight squads, a total of 195 people. His followers dispatched a total of 26 elite or ordinary knight squads, a total of 342 people. Altogether, 667 knight squads were mixed into 4 orders of chivalry. The Count himself led the elite Coral Island orders of chivalry, while Levis served as the liaison officer. He led a mixed orders of chivalry, Viscount Trick Wildgrass led a mixed orders of chivalry, and Viscount Jonas Gravel led the last one. Rest for 3 days. After 3 days, all knight are to gather in Coral City and set out for Golden Island by ship. We will act together with Marquis Roderick's orders of chivalry. The Count, dressed in military attire and holding his sword, spoke in a powerful and resonant voice. All the aristocrats participating in the war. Covering their left chests with one hand, they performed a knight salute, "Follow, sir." Chapter 114. The Count was very busy. Liszt just took a break to greet him and give his blessings. Liszt then left Tulip Castle and returned to Flower Town. Before leaving, the Count said solemnly, "Flower Town is developing very well. I am paying attention to the training of your knight squad. I hope that you and Levis can fight side by side in next year's expedition. I am also looking forward to it." Liszt responded. In his heart, he could not deny it. In terms of war, it was impossible to fight a war, it was impossible to fight a war in this life. He didn't know how to flatter people. He could only maintain his current lifestyle by farming. However, no one could say for sure what would happen in the future. He would not stay in Flower Town all his life and be a country baron. Riding a dragon was a big goal in life, and owning an island was a small goal. To have an island as a fief, one had to at least be a viscount, which required some effort. On the way back, Black Dragon galloped. He was slightly distracted on horseback. The excitement of the aristocrats at the expedition banquet infected him. The aristocrats might be a group of parasites, but their desire for glory was very pure. He wanted to fight, he wanted to charge, he wanted to stake his life for riches and honor. Am I really not going to the battlefield? If I don't go to the battlefield, how can I promote my title? Was it a rebellion? Without the strength to slay a dragon, rebellion is tantamount to courting death. The Sapphire family's sapphire dragon could not be treated as a decoration. That was the world's top power, equivalent to nuclear weapons. It was best not to test it. Going to the battlefield to grab credit is the most effective way to promote. The Lord does not need to take the lead in the charge. Let the knight fight and kill, it can still guarantee my safety. At worst, I will be captured and let others redeem me. It will be a bit shameful, but it is most important to keep my life. Maybe I can take the route of an ordinary aristocratic second son and win over an aristocratic lady? Some aristocrats only had daughters. Their titles would be inherited by their daughters. The Grand Duchy recognized female knights. Such an aristocratic lady was the best marriage partner for an aristocratic second son. Some aristocratic ladies, favored by their parents, would get a fief and become a hereditary aristocrat, such as Elvira. She would also be the best marriage partner for the second son of a noble. It's a pity that in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, there are only a few suitable noble ladies. There are many noble ladies at the level of lord, knight, and baron. Noble ladies at the level of viscount and countess are extremely rare. The archipelago is not very big to begin with. There are only 7 marquises and more than 20 earls. Moreover, there was another very real problem. The aristocratic ladies desired the higher-ranking aristocratic young masters, not ordinary small aristocrats. I'm very handsome. My father is an earl, my grandfather is a marquis, and I myself am a baron. Among the second sons of the nobles, I'm probably an extremely competitive existence. Let me think carefully, those single noble ladies in the Grand Duchy who are suitable for marriage. After thinking for a while, he actually couldn't think of a single one. All the nobles hoped to have a son to inherit their title. There were very, very few nobles who only had one daughter. The battlefield was too dangerous, and there were too few female knights. Liszt thought of a third way to obtain a title, by making a great contribution. If he offered his papermaking technique to the Sapphire Grand Duke, he might be able to obtain the title of Count, or even Marquis. However, the titles conferred on the basis of contribution are all life titles without fiefdoms. This method is not advisable at all. After thinking it over, he still couldn't come up with a good solution. He smiled self-deprecatingly and inwardly sighed. Instead of going through so much trouble, it would be better to look forward to the Count and leave us. Hold on, I feel that this idea shouldn't appear. After all, they are blood relatives. After returning to the flower town, Liszt once again fell into a leisurely pace of life. The Count was in a hurry to participate in the war. He couldn't even hold his birthday on the Coral Island on September 14th. Therefore, he didn't have to worry about diplomacy and could develop the town with peace of mind. The Black Nightshade was still half dead, but as long as it wasn't dead, it meant that the sprite worm still had the desire to live. There was still hope. What brought him joy was the fragrant coconut tree. The fruit farmer Jiggs came to report that the fragrant coconut had split open. Instead of coconut milk, a milky white, plump sprite worm crawled out. He brought the jade powder and the jade box. Liszt rushed to the oyster settlement, climbed the several tens of meters tall fragrant coconut tree, and saw the long-awaited fragrant coconut tree sprite worm. It was very fat, fatter than all the sprite worms he had on hand. Its body was also particularly white, as if it was faintly glowing. It looked as if it had just taken a milk bath. Little fellow, come, I'll treat you to some jade powder. He sprinkled the jade powder on the fragrant coconut to lure the sprite worm. The newborn sprite worm, relying on its instincts, was quickly attracted by the magic power contained in the jade powder. It began to swallow the jade powder in large mouthfuls. Next, Liszt simply smeared the jade powder on his finger and extended it to the sprite worm's mouth. He bit down. The contract was completed. The pleasant feeling of telepathy made him and the fragrant coconut tree sprite worm closely linked, sharing joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. After putting the fragrant coconut sprite worm into the jade box, Liszt rewarded each of the fruit farmers who had been patiently looking after the fragrant coconut sprite worm with a silver coin. Jiggs, you still have to carefully look after the worm stalk, understand? Understood, Sir Lord. After returning to the castle, the fragrant coconut sprite worm was handed over to Carter to be stored in the wormhouse. Carter was very happy, but at the same time, he expressed his concern. Master, we already have 8 sprite worms. I am afraid that the castle servants will not be able to meticulously look after every worm stalk. Do you need to hire new servants to specifically look after the worm stalks? This question reminded List. Of course, no one in the flower town dared to disobey him, let alone destroy his worm stalks. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. What if a commoner went crazy and cut down the worm stalk? Or what if a beast accidentally ate the worm stalk? Don't expect the fence to stop everything. Your concern is very reasonable. However, I do not intend to hire servants to look after the worm stalks. I intend to set up a regular team to look after the worm stalks. He immediately called Gort, Marcus, and Karl Hammerstein. Sir. Teacher Gort, Teacher Marcus, Karl, I called you here because I have more and more sprite worms. The worm stalks are scattered all over the fief, they need better protection. Sir, do you need more people from the patrol team to frequently patrol the worm stalks? Just patrolling is not enough. I need to focus on protecting them for a long time. Do you have any good ideas? List had an idea, but he did not reveal it. Holding back and not revealing, this was the way of the superior to control his subordinates. Gort thought for a moment, then said, "At present, the worm stalks are mainly protected by the castle serving men, the surveillance of the local farmers, the patrol team, as well as the fence's isolation. Perhaps we can train more patrol team members to specifically patrol the worm stalks." Marcus was even more straightforward, "We can leave it to the night squad to patrol." Karl finally said, "Sir, I think that we can arrange for patrol team members to specifically keep watch around the worm stalks. At present, we have 20 patrol team members. We do not need so many to patrol the fief. By dividing 8 patrol team members to keep watch over the worm stalks can be protected at all times. Karl's proposal is more in line with my idea. However, there is no need for patrol team members to keep watch, that would be a waste of manpower. Select strong serfs from each settlement and arrange for them to guard the worm stalks in shifts. The fief's administrative office will pay them a copper coin a day. Chapter 115. Rome had been very excited recently. He thought that, like Odin and Gray, he would not be able to cultivate chi and would eventually be abandoned by Mr. Marcus. The consequences of being abandoned and becoming a good-for-nothing without chi were very frightening. He, Karl, Odin, and Gray were all serfs and were hired as Baron List's retainer knight. But now, Karl had become a trainee knight, the Flower Town's defense officer, and had a patrol team of 20 people under his command. When he saw Karl, he had to call him Mr. Karl. The change in his status put great pressure on him. There was a suffocating sense of urgency, as if the giant hand of fate was clutching his throat, trying to strangle his hope of progress. He was afraid that he would really achieve nothing. Therefore, not only did he earnestly practice cultivation when Marcus was teaching, but he also practiced in private, regardless of everything else. Finally, he successfully cultivated chi, low-level chi, and became a trainee knight. His wish was fulfilled, and his hard work reaped the fruits of his hard work. The Sir Lord appointed him as the captain of the patrol team to assist Karl and be responsible for the fief's public security. Although his status was not as good as that of Karl, but Rome was already very satisfied. His talent was not as outstanding as that of Karl, and he cultivated chi many days later than Karl. Therefore, he should be placed under Karl. The patrol team originally had a captain, but the captain was just an ordinary person who was not convinced by Rome's arrival. However, Rome easily taught the other party how to behave with a few punches. Strength, with just low-level chi, I already have strength that ordinary people can only look at in the dust. How powerful will an earth knight with mid-level chi be? Before he had obtained chi, he did not have a very intuitive understanding of knight. He only knew that knights were very strong, but how strong they were and how marvelous their chi was, he had no way of knowing. Now that he had chi, he finally fully understood the tremendous qualitative change that chi brought to a knight. Earth Knight. I have no hope of obtaining mid-level chi in this lifetime. However, Sir Lord has given me a chance to change my fate, and I, Ram Winesong, will seize it. From today onwards, I will definitely let my son start cultivating Do Chi from a young age. He was not married yet, but there were already many girls in the town who had expressed their love for him. A trainee knight was still very popular. My son will become an earth knight like Mr. Marcus. At that time, he would have the hope of climbing up to the nobility. For a better tomorrow. Luomu did his job conscientiously every day and never slacked off in his patrol work. As the patrol leader, he was especially satisfied. However, what Ram did not know was that List had already noticed his conscientiousness. List was not a fan of mundane tasks. It was not his style to worry about the daily lives of the people in the small town. He did not want to be a Han Xian who was good at commanding soldiers, but a Liu Bang who was good at commanding generals. Therefore, he admired subordinates who worked hard. Ram was a subordinate who worked hard. Ram, based on your performance, I have a new mission for you. Sir, please instruct me. You and Carl have both become trainee knight and can take charge on your own. Therefore, I intend to set up the position of insect officer in the flower town and set up an insect protection team. The team members will be drawn from the strong labor force of the various settlements. As for you, you will serve as the insect officer. What you need to do is to lead the insect protection team and protect the worm stalks. After thinking about it, List decided to set up a separate insect protection team. The basic model of this team was roughly equivalent to a militia organization and could be regarded as a supplement to the patrol team. In the future, more and more people would pour into the flower town. The patrol team alone would not be able to maintain law and order. The insect protection team was part of the security force. Patrol team, police station. Insect protection team, militia battalion. Night team, army. It was roughly this line of thought. As the successor of the doctrine of bringing, List's thoughts would always be set up in this way. Ram immediately knelt on one knee and performed a knight salute. Ram is willing to follow in Sir's footsteps for life. His body trembled slightly. This was caused by excitement. He never thought that opportunities to change his fate would come one after another. Now, he had officially entered the ranks of officials. Officials were not a class in the formal sense. However, to be able to serve as an official meant that one had already entered the ranks of aristocratic reserve service. When he left the castle, he was still in a bit of a trance, his body seemingly floating. Serving Sir is a moment in my life when I, Ram, am deeply favored by the glory of a knight. Perhaps it was because he felt List's sincere concern for the sprite worm. Less than 2 days after the establishment of the insect protection team, he saw that the leaves of the black nightshade worm stalk in the black nightshade field had regained a trace of vitality. The originally covered black spots had also dissipated quite a bit. So, you made it? List hurriedly summoned the long-awaited smoke mission. Unsurprisingly, the smoke serpentines had already changed. Mission completed. Reward, a black nightshade sprite worm. Sure enough, the black nightshade breeds a sprite worm. This is my 9th sprite worm. Very good. Although I don't know what the black nightshade is used for. The black nightshade berries could be eaten, but only as a snack. Even with the black nightshade worm, it could not bear many berries. It was better than nothing. At least, it was a sprite worm. The smoke distorted and issued a new mission. The late heavy rain is about to visit the flower town. Most of the fief's residents' houses have been in disrepair for many years and cannot withstand the scouring of the heavy rain. As the Lord, how can you sit idly by and do nothing? Please repair the fief's houses. Reward, a variant type of thorns. Another variant type of thorns? List mused, this is already the 3rd mission related to thorns. It seems that it must be a chain mission. The previous invisible dragon chain mission rewarded a space gem. What good things will be rewarded for this time's chain mission? He had a vague guess, a thorn's lesser sprite. Will it be a thorn's lesser sprite? Although he could not guarantee it, List firmly suppressed the idea. He would not be disappointed if he did not hold out hope. Once he really obtained it, it would be a huge surprise. For now, he just had to do his best to complete the mission. Repair the houses. It seems that it is time for another national war. List immediately summoned all the fief's officials and arranged for the repair of the fief's houses. There was almost no rain this summer, which is not common sense. I speculate that there may be a strong rainstorm in the next few days. Most of the houses in the flower town are old wooden houses, which are very unsafe. The new houses are already under construction. As for the serfs, they can be sent to repair their own wooden houses. Gort inevitably looked down on the serfs. Blair was suspected of flattering him. The castle should be repaired the most. The place where Sir lives should be safer and more beautiful. As for the castle's repair work, let's talk about it after the autumn harvest is over and the labor force is idle. Now, each of you will be assigned your tasks. Make sure that every damaged wooden house is properly reinforced. All civilians, whether serfs or freedmen, must accept the work arrangements. After a pause, List said, all civilians are not paid. They must work for free to repair their own wooden houses. However, the materials for the repair of the wooden houses will be paid by the castle. This is a benefit I give to my subjects. Chapter 116. Clop clop clop. The sound of horse hooves rolled over the gravel road. Black Dragon held its head high, its black mane fluttering in the wind. This main road had been under construction for more than 2 months. Every day, 180 civilian workers were maintained, each of whom was paid 1 copper coin a day. In other words, this road cost 180 copper coins a day. In 2 months, a total of more than 10,000 copper coins, or about 1 gold coin, had been spent. Sometimes, manpower was so cheap that it made people sigh. The stones transported from various places were crushed into fingernail-sized gravel and spread on the ground. The gravel mixed with the sand of the East Coast made the entire road look very clean and tidy. Without cement, gravel and sand would unknowingly fall into one's shoes when stepped on it. Unfortunately, the Thorns Ridge is just a rocky mound. The stones are also very small, unable to even cut through flagstones. Otherwise, it would have been more beautiful to build the main road into a flagstone road. List felt a bit regretful. The town was too barren, and the surrounding resources were also extremely scarce. He had sold the black pearls twice, and his purse was bulging with more than 500 gold coins. However, it could not be immediately converted into resources. Livestock could not be bought, pasture was scarce, buildings could not be built, manpower was insufficient, roads could not be repaired frequently, stone was insufficient, uncultivated fields could not be planted, tools were scarce. Just like today, the whole town began to repair the wooden houses. There were no workers working on the road. Under the supervision of patrols and clerks, the commoners began to check whether their wooden houses were sturdy. Cracked beams had to be reported for replacement, damaged roofs had to be reported for repair, loosened windows had to be reported for reinforcement, and decayed corners had to be reported for repair. The commoners were very enthusiastic. This was because the Sir Lord would provide the repair materials. This made the commoners feel that they had taken advantage of the situation. If they did not report it, they would suffer a great loss. Perhaps I should start baking bricks. There is not enough stone, so I can make up for it with bricks. List thought as he watched the vigorous renovation of the wooden houses. Stonemasons and carpenters were the construction workers of the other world. Commoners lived in wooden houses, while aristocrats lived in stone castles. In the flower town, only List's castle was built from stone and used glutinous rice as a gel material. The value of glutinous rice was very high. The sprites bred by glutinous rice were called wall sprites. Its value did not lie in its edible properties, but in its strong binding properties. Without cement, the solidification of the wall was either made of clay or glutinous rice. Fortunately, the Tulip family had a glutinous rice sprite, so the castle that the Earl built was extravagantly made of glutinous rice. Such a castle was many times stronger than a castle made of mud, and it could be built very high. For example, Liszt's castle. After removing the steeple-shaped roof, it was possible to add a few more floors. There's almost no technical content in the firing of bricks. As long as we find clay suitable for firing bricks, we'll be able to fire qualified bricks. However, to fire bricks, we'll need to build a brick kiln, and we'll need coal. If we don't have coal, we'll at least need charcoal. Without experimenting, I'm afraid we won't be able to produce qualified bricks. Liszt, who liked to read and ponder over things when he had nothing to do, was quite knowledgeable. He knew how to make ice with saltpeter, clay bricks, handmade paper, black gunpowder formula, indigenous cement, distilled liquor, pancreas formula, binoculars, fired glass, and when the black gunpowder was successfully mixed, he could even make hand grenades. In addition, the water wheel, the plow, the windmill, after tinkering with it, he could also explain the general principle. However, it wasn't easy to turn knowledge into tangible objects. The biggest constraints were materials and labor. Making ice with saltpeter required saltpeter. If he didn't find a small saltpeter mine, making ice would be an empty slogan. Firing glass was the same, which required quartz sand and soda ash. Quartz sand probably required a quartz vein, which he remembered was the kind of stone that looked a little transparent. But what was soda ash? Was it soda? He remembered that when he made porridge, he needed to add some soda. There might be a small amount of soda ash in plant ash, but where could he get soda ash for firing glass? In addition to saltpeter, black gunpowder also needed sulfur. Limestone was needed for cement. Strictly speaking, I don't seem to know what sulfur and limestone look like, right? Liszt suddenly thought of a very serious problem. He only knew that saltpeter could be used to make ice, quartz could be used to fire glass, limestone could be used to make cement, and sulfur could be used to make explosives. But what did limestone and sulfur look like? Previously, he only knew that saltpeter was white. Many books mentioned that it grew in toilets and corners. Later, after the smoke mission indicated that there was a small saltpeter mine, he successfully discovered saltpeter. If he really had to look for a saltpeter mine by himself, he might not be able to find it. Limestone is a rather vulgar name. It is probably a common stone. Does it have anything to do with marble or granite? As for sulfur, I have to look for it in volcanic craters. It is said that volcanic craters have the smell of sulfur. At this moment, Liszt felt that his real self was far more ignorant than he imagined. This is a bit awkward, but I definitely know where to find the soil for firing bricks. In theory, firing bricks required clay, the kind of soil that could be fired into red bricks. However, if one did not pursue high quality, then most of the soil could be used to fire bricks. Soil that was a bit sticky was considered a good material. There was still a lot of such soil in the flower town. When the mission is completed, I will gather a group of serfs to fire bricks for me. I want to build houses with bricks. Build flame mushroom greenhouses, build toilets, build pig, horse, cow, and sheep pens, build factories. Then build a football field, a basketball court, and raise a group of professional players to come and play games. I still have to spend time looking for quartz, limestone, and soda ash. Cement and glass have a wide range of uses. Then he suddenly thought, in fact, I am an aristocrat. Enjoying life is what I should do. Why do I think about inventions and research all day long? He used to be a liberal arts student. He was not a science student. He studied information management at university. Life is so wonderful, I don't want to be a wizard. Just as he was riding his horse, his thoughts flying. Not far away, on the side of the street, a wooden house collapsed with a thump. List raised his hand to block the sunlight and looked over. A group of people were watching the commotion in a mess. He ordered a retainer knight, "What happened? Go and ask." The retainer knight quickly brought over a member of the patrol who was supervising the scene. The patrol member knelt on the ground and answered List's question, "Sir Lord, it was Hunter with the loud voice who tore down his wooden house." "Tore down his own wooden house?" "Yes, we saw with our own eyes that Hunter was hitting his own wooden house with a stick, breaking a few supporting pillars. After that, the wooden house collapsed, and Hunter was buried in it. However, he was not killed, only one of his arms was broken." "Why did he tear down his wooden house?" Chapter 117. Audacious Unruly Commoner. After listening to the patrol member's report, this thought flashed through List's mind. This was simply a scam against the Lord. They even wanted to take advantage of the Lord. However, he did not listen to the patrol member's side of the story. "Sean, go and ask Hunter if he tore down his own cabin." "Yes, sir." The retainer knight Sean quickly returned. At the same time, Gort also hurried over. The result was certain. When Hunter heard that the castle would pay for the repair of the cabin, he threatened to replace every piece of wood in his cabin on the spot. Then, extreme joy turned to sorrow and the cabin collapsed. "Teacher Gort, how do you think we should deal with this?" List didn't show any indignation on his face. He just asked indifferently. "Abominable commoner, he should be beaten to death." Gort replied in a loud voice, "Sir, the free commoner Hunter is greedy. He even dares to covet the castle's sacred and inviolable things. He should be severely punished. I think that he should be demoted to a serf and whipped 100 times." There were many civilians in the surroundings. When they heard Gort's voice, they couldn't help but shrink back. Being demoted to a serf was not terrible. But being whipped 100 times was enough to beat someone to death. In particular, there were a few civilians who had tampered with their own cabin, wanting to take advantage of it. When they heard this, their legs almost began to tremble. The greed in their hearts subsided in an instant. They groped and quietly moved towards their home, ready to stuff the tampered wood back in. To be honest, 100 lashes was a bit heavy. The crime was not worthy of death. However, Hunter's behavior made List quite unhappy. He had worked hard to lead the flower town to prosperity, yet some people did not know how to be grateful and still wanted to take advantage of it. This kind of practice must not be allowed to grow, it must be stifled. For the sake of the fact that one of his arms has already been smashed, the whipping will be remembered for the time being. After he recovers, split it into 2 batches of 50 lashes each. He glanced at the nervous civilians in the surroundings and told Gort, "Do a good job of spreading the word. I don't want to find a second person doing something similar." "As you wish, sir." A cruel smile appeared on Gort's face. "I will let these foolish commoners know whether a few pieces of wood or their own lives are more important." After the commotion, List was no longer in the mood to continue patrolling the wooden hut repair battle. He turned his horse around and returned to the castle. The black nightshade cordyceps in the black nightshade field were gradually recovering, and the magic power in them could already flow stably. The black spots and withered leaves gradually turned green again. After looking at the nightshade, List rode his horse around the stud farm. Finally, he returned to the shade of the green apple tree. Carter, who had just come out of the cellar with a bunch of keys, walked over. His pace was very slow, and he had the calmness of an old man. His clothes were always meticulous. They were a little shabby, but they were ironed very neatly, without any loose threads or wrinkles. "Master, you don't seem to be in a good mood. Looks like my mood is written all over my face. Is there anything I can do for you?" Carter asked with a smile. His smile was very amiable, making people feel warm immediately. List motioned for Thomas to bring a stool for Carter, and then said, Mr. Carter, do you think I am a qualified lord? I have never doubted it. You have the courage of the tulip family and the compassion, justice, humility, and honor of aristocrats. You have always been looked after by the glory of the night. Has the flower town changed in the past 6 months? It has changed a lot. I remember that when I first came to the flower town, the expressions on the faces of the small town's residents were numb. Now, it is as if they have obtained a new life. I see a lot of smiling faces, more smiling faces than I have seen anywhere else. Everyone is grateful for your kindness, master. Not everyone. Liszt picked up the iced fruit juice and took a sip. The coolness spread from his throat to his stomach, and then to his whole body. Today, I met a commoner who wanted the castle to build a new house for him for free. He tore down his old wooden house without the slightest consideration for my kindness. You are not worth getting angry over such a commoner. Humble commoners are different from noble aristocrats, they are always full of all kinds of vices. All right, I accept your statement. Liszt put away the unhappiness in his heart. In fact, Teacher Gort's whip has already calmed my anger. Perhaps he himself hadn't realized it. He had been thinking more and more from the standpoint of an aristocrat. As a transmigrator, Liszt still couldn't defy the heavens and change this great era. He gradually integrated into it, betraying the communist position and falling to the standpoint of the exploiting class. He was not far from becoming a qualified native. But he had his own words to refute: my dream is to ride a dragon, not to change the world. The great battle to repair the wooden house lasted for 5 days. It couldn't continue because on this day, the north wind howled and dark clouds covered the sky. The alfalfa on the horse field swayed with the wind, unable to straighten up for even a moment. The castle servants were busy installing the wooden planks on the windows to shelter them from the wind and rain. If he had money, Liszt could carve glass out of crystals and install them on the windows, just like in Tulip Castle. But he wasn't so extravagant. That box of crystals was reserved for the future to create magic items. For the time being, the castle's windows relied on removable wooden planks to shelter them. In addition, every window had a curtain woven from straw, which could be used to shelter them from the sun and mosquitoes. Not now, the wind outside would blow the curtain apart. After the wooden planks were installed, the castle's originally not very bright light became even dimmer. Carter hurriedly asked the servants to light candles in the study, living room, and other rooms, so that the room could regain light. Now that Liszt had enough money, he could light more candles, and there were 5 or 6 in the study. Mr. Carter, don't worry about wastage, my room needs to be bright enough. Reading in dim light is very harmful to the eyes. Liszt held a novel in his hands and flipped through it in boredom. He had already read all of the castle's 182 books more than twice. Basically, a book had tens of thousands of words at most, and only a few thousand words at least. He admired the authors who wrote night novels. In just a few thousand words, they had to write a complete story with twists and turns. Moreover, there had to be dragons, princesses, orders of chivalry, kings, wars, banquets. Otherwise, no aristocrats would buy their books. If aristocrats did not buy books, then these destitute minor aristocrats who wrote all kinds of fabricated stories would starve to death. There was no doubt that those who chose to write were basically destitute aristocrats. Commoners could not write at all. Master, looking at the current weather, there will be a heavy rain today. The next heavy rain is also good. The flower town's several ponds are about to dry up and are in urgent need of rainwater to replenish them. I hope it won't ruin the crops and affect this season's taxes. Carter lifted a wooden plank and looked at the gloomy sky outside, saying worriedly, "Don't be nervous. There is no shortage of food in the castle and the town. The East Coast is the flower town's dining hall," Liszt said faintly. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes not focused on the night novel in front of him. Chapter 118. The storm was fierce. When the flower town was swayed by the strong wind, sand and dust filled the sky. For a moment, the whole world suddenly became quiet. Then, bean-sized raindrops pattered on the top of the castle's steeple, as if a basin of water had been poured down, splashing everywhere. In the kennel, Dosen's loud barking came. In a room downstairs, Blessed Curls was also quack, quack. Outside the castle and inside the castle were two different worlds. Listening attentively, List could hear the servants chatting in the kitchen and dining room downstairs. Due to the heavy rain, there was nothing to do, so they could only chat. Mr. Carter's footsteps lingered upstairs and downstairs. He was always wandering around, inspecting every part of the castle. Mrs. Morrison, who was inspecting the maids' cleaning, met with Carter. They seemed to chat for a while, evaluating the performance of the serving men and maidservants. The two stewards were conscientious and conscientious. The 15 servants did not always get along so well. Thomas's attitude towards the serving men was very bad. However, he was List's valet and had a very high status, so no one dared to say anything. Not only did he often find fault with the serving men, but from time to time, he also made some sarcastic remarks. Sometimes, he was not so respectful towards Carter. Carter could not figure out why List would tolerate such a bad Thomas. Thomas destroyed the harmonious atmosphere of the castle's servants. He could only say. Carter and List had different identities, so they looked at things from different angles. Carter tried to make the castle full of harmony and love. But List did not want this to be the case. If the servants were united, he, as the master, would feel uncomfortable. Imagine a servant making a mistake, and because they had a good relationship, all the servants helped to cover it up. Wouldn't it be possible to fool List? Without Thomas as a troublemaker, the servants would become more and more indulgent. With Thomas keeping an eye on them and finding fault with them at any time, the servants would work in fear. Those in a higher position would always place a few confidants in their subordinate organizations. Even the school teachers knew that they had to cultivate a few students who were good at snitching. He did not choose to eavesdrop on the servants' conversation. List's expression was slightly serious. His thoughts drifted. In this world, there are actually such things as ghosts? When the predecessor was young, the bedtime stories that were passed down by word of mouth mentioned ghosts. Legend has it that after a person dies, their soul will leave their body and exist. They have no consciousness and only wander aimlessly. Almost no one had ever seen a ghost. He searched all the memories of his predecessor, but he had not heard of anyone encountering a specter on Coral Island. Of the 100 or so night novels that he had read recently, there were a few that mentioned ghosts, but most of them were just like vampires, werewolves, and zombies in the mines. They were relatively unpopular and rarely appeared. In the past, when he saw it, he would just laugh it off, not taking it seriously. The reason why he thought of ghosts again was that the smoke mission reminded him of ghosts. Mission, an old and dilapidated shipwreck. Exposed to the wind and sun, fishermen who pass by the shipwreck often feel a chill on their backs. It seems that there is something in the shipwreck staring at them, making them not dare to approach. Please find out the reason. Reward, a broken bone. List did not let anyone chop the shipwreck with the 5 treasure chests and burn it for firewood. He felt that the shipwreck could barely be regarded as a tourist attraction, so he placed it in the oyster settlement to add to the oyster settlement's historical heritage. He was also planning to have the shipwreck properly maintained when he had time. He did not expect that the shipwreck would actually hide a secret. What is in the shipwreck? Previously, when the patrol team was looking for the treasure, they had already searched the entire ship inside and out. Apart from some cloth, grain residue, and 5 treasure chests, there was nothing else. Or perhaps, there was something, but it was not easy to see. He could easily associate it with ghosts, dirty things, shipwrecks, ghost ships, and finally with the legendary specter. Bang bang. A bright light flashed outside the castle, followed by the rumbling of thunder. The wind blew again, accompanied by the pitter-patter of raindrops, isolating the castle from everything outside. Walking to the window, he put down a wooden block and looked at the curtain of rain outside. Liszt felt a sense of desolation, as if he was isolated from the world. Loneliness welled up in his heart, and he suddenly realized that he had been here for half a year. From the world of technological civilization, he had entered the world of magic and qi. It was hard to say whether it was good or bad. In his hometown, the standard of living was a bit higher, but he was just a bitter overtime dog. Here, the standard of living was relatively poor, but he was an aristocrat with supreme power. He also had qi to strengthen his body and was immune to all kinds of diseases. In comparison, I prefer my current life. I like the picture of a maid busying herself in front of me. There was a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. He was not too conflicted. Soon, his thoughts returned to the smoke mission. If there is really a ghost in the shipwreck, then it must be eradicated as soon as possible so as not to endanger the lives of the fishermen. The mission reward is a broken bone, but does it have anything to do with the ghost? He wanted to go to the shipwreck, find out the reason, and complete the mission. But the rain was too heavy outside, and it was difficult to travel. He could only stay in the castle and wait in boredom. However, he waited. 3 days. The heavy rain flooded the entire town. Fortunately, the town-wide wooden houses had been repaired in advance. The patrols braving the rain had yet to find any collapsed wooden houses. The worm stalks were also safe. Even the most fragile black nightshade worm stalk was still intact because of the protection. But after 3 days of heavy rain, 2 people died. An old serf went out to pick vegetables, accidentally slipped, and never got up again. Another mother of 3 went to the beach in the rain to pick up shells, but after returning, she fell seriously ill and died. Picking up shells on the beach? Liszt listened to Gort's report, and his heart stirred. Could it be related to the shipwreck? He immediately asked, "Teacher Gort, the woman who died of illness, has the body been examined? Is there anything wrong?" "Examine the body?" "Sorry, sir, I did not examine the body. I thought it was just a serf who died of illness. This kind of thing, it happens very often." Perhaps Liszt was too sensitive. But he still decided to examine the body of the woman who died of illness in person. "Teacher Gort, be sensitive. Recently, there have been fishermen who have responded that there is something wrong with the shipwreck, as if there is something dirty on it. I suspect that the woman's death may be related to the shipwreck." Shipwreck? Gort was puzzled. He had not heard of such news at all, but when Liszt mentioned it, he had to pay attention to it. He believed that Liszt had a lot of eyes in Flower Town, and nothing could escape Liszt's attention. "Sir, I will go arrange it. Do you want to examine the body together?" Chapter 119. The majestic group of people trampled on the puddles on horseback. The retainer knight and valet surrounded Liszt, while Gort, Marcus, and other officials followed closely behind. Compared to the previous time when there were only 2 or 3 people, the current ostentatious scene was very imposing. In fact, there was no need for so many people to follow in the fief. However, Liszt still did it. He liked this kind of aristocratic behavior. Compared to the Count and even his brother Levis, who had a night squad following them when they went out, his team was not big enough and had to work hard to develop. It would be best if he could also bring Dosen and Blessed Curls. With the yellow on the left and the blue on the right. "Sir, the roads of the Flower Town are better than those of the Coral City." Isaiah exclaimed in admiration, "Every time it rains in the Coral City, it feels like a city of excrement. The excrement floating on the streets is disgusting. Here, there is no excrement, not even silt." The main road was a gravel road, which basically had no silt. The road between the settlements was a sea sand road, which would have silt, but not much. Gort laughed and complimented in a timely manner. Without Sir's wisdom, there would not be such a wonderful environment as the Flower Town. Before, I couldn't understand the benefits of building roads, but little by little, they were revealed to me. I hope that in the future, every road will be built as a gravel road. List smiled. He didn't show any complacent expression. This was nothing. Later on, when he made cement, there would be more surprises. The sky had yet to completely clear up, and there was still a drizzle. He was wearing a wide black cloak and riding a pure black dragon. At first glance, he looked very gloomy. Were it not for his handsome face and the few strands of light blonde hair on his forehead, adding to his liveliness, he could probably impersonate the ringwraith of the Lord of the Rings. After a while, the group had arrived at the Barley settlement. The woman who died of illness was a serf of the Barley settlement. The corpse was still placed in the house. According to the funeral custom of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, after death, people were buried directly in the ground. However, it had been raining heavily for the past few days, so there was no way to bury the corpses. Of the woman's 3 children, 2 were already adults. Under the leadership of their dull father, they knelt on the ground to welcome List's arrival. Naturally, the retainer would explain the purpose of the visit. List only needed to walk to the corpse and examine it. Marcus and Gort checked the corpse first, but they didn't find anything wrong with it. Then, List personally inspected it. This was his first time facing a dead person. He was a little nervous, but he controlled himself well and did not show any emotion. Observing with the naked eye, he did not see anything wrong with the corpse, but when he cast magic eyes, he found that there was nothing wrong with it. There was a flash of black magic on the corpse. When he took a closer look, the black magic disappeared again. List chose to believe his eyes. He observed quietly, and about a minute later, another wisp of black magic flickered in the corpse and disappeared. "Sir, did you observe anything?" Marcus asked. "There is something wrong with the corpse. I felt signs of magic on the corpse. She did not die of a normal disease, but was infected with something dirty." Gort was surprised. Is there really something dirty? What could it be? If it was infected from the shipwreck, could it be a ghost? Legend has it that there are ghost ships on the sea. The shipwreck we found is not a ghost ship, right? Yes or no, we will know after checking it. By the way, how do you think we should deal with this corpse? To be on the safe side, we should burn it. There was no concept of the dead is the most important here, and there was no such thing as ancestor worship. After people died, they were basically simply buried, especially civilians. When they died, they would roll up a straw mat, dig a deep pit and bury them, and then there would be nothing else to do. Even some civilians were not willing to dig a pit at all, and it was possible to directly throw the bodies of their relatives into the mountains or into the water. Therefore, when Gort proposed to burn the corpse, the wooden husband of the dead woman did not have any objection. On the contrary, he was somewhat excited. Because List had Gort give him 10 silver coins as compensation. The dirty things brought by the shipwreck caused the death of the woman. In the final analysis, it was List himself who did not allow others to dispose of the shipwreck. Although he was the Lord and would not be punished. 10 silver coins was also a comfort to his conscience. After a moment. A fire. The corpse was burned to ashes in the flames. Looking at the residue after burning and finding no traces of black magic, List breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that even dirty things could be burned clean by fire. After disposing of the corpse, the group quickly rushed to the oyster settlement and arrived near the shipwreck. Before List could approach, Marcus stopped him. "Sir, the shipwreck is dangerous, you should avoid it. Leave it to us to inspect." Gort replied righteously, "That's right, my lord. You shouldn't put yourself in danger. Mr. Marcus is an elite Earth Knight, he will definitely be able to deal with the shipwreck." While speaking, he stood beside List, without the slightest intention of approaching the shipwreck. The shipwreck seemed to have been washed away by the heavy rain. The seaweed and other attachments on its surface had been washed away, revealing mottled wooden planks and rusted metal frames. It was not a large ship, much smaller than the Flower. Moreover, it was seriously damaged, and the cabin could basically be seen from the outside. Marcus led the night squad to surround the shipwreck and was about to enter the cabin for inspection. Liszt suddenly said, "Teacher Marcus, there is no need to waste so much effort. There is definitely something wrong with the shipwreck. Just smash it, dismantle it, and inspect it piece by piece to avoid any accidents." He did not intend to keep a shipwreck with dirty things as a tourist attraction. Therefore, violent dismantling was the safest and fastest way. Marcus naturally would not refuse. He immediately took people to split the shipwreck, dismantled the wooden planks and iron frames, and piled them on the beach. During this process, Liszt had been intermittently casting magic eyes. Just as the two retainer knight carried a broken piece of dragon bone, Liszt suddenly saw black magic flickering at the fracture of the dragon bone. Magic power usually had a color. For example, fire magic was mostly red, and water magic was mostly blue, especially when it manifested as qi. But it was not absolute. Some magic showed a variety of mixed attributes and would have a variety of strange colors. Some magic showed no attributes and would also have a variety of colors. Even archmages, who had studied magic to a profound realm, could not unravel the essence and mystery of magic. What did black magic represent? Liszt did not understand. But he knew that he had probably found the cause of the shipwreck's problem. "Teacher Marcus, carefully examine this dragon bone, I feel traces of magic." After Liszt's reminder, Marcus quickly picked up the dragon bone, touched it with both hands, and carefully observed and felt it. After a moment, Marcus's eyes bloomed as he also felt magic. "Sir, there really is a problem, I feel a cold magic." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.